he was given a state-level plea deal, not a federal deal, but that was the softball deal that sort of started this all. So there should be DOJ documents. There certainly will be DOJ documents relating to that case. And I think the big question on people's minds is, why did those prosecutors, led by Alexander Acosta, give Epstein such a sweetheart deal? So that's number one. Number two, you have the 2019 federal prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein by federal prosecutors in Manhattan, the Southern District of New York. That resulted in Epstein being locked up. He died in jail during the pendency of that case. And then finally, you have the prosecution of Ghislaine Maxwell, 2019 into 2021, also by federal prosecutors, Southern District of New York. She was tried, convicted, sentenced to 20 years, and now she's serving that. So those are the three main investigations. In terms of what type of documents, I expect, based on the law, to look like what my old files might have looked like at DOJ. You'll have what we call FBI 302s, which are summaries of witness statements. You will have phone records, financial records, travel records. You may have internal memos laying out, here's what we think of the evidence. It's strong here. It's weak here. This law is really quite broad, Casey, in what it requires DOJ to turn over. So we should get an unprecedented look behind the door at DOJ.
Really remarkable. All right, joining us now, Ellie, stand by for me. Democratic Congressman of Illinois, Raja Krishnamoorthi. He sits on the House Oversight Committee. They have been releasing batches of images and documents that have come in from Epstein's estate prior to this particular deadline. Congressman, thanks very much for spending some time with us. A top line question for you. Is it your understanding that the Epstein estate had provided the documents that they've provided to the Congress, also to the Department of Justice, or do you not know the answer to that question?
I don't know the answer to that question, but once they made them available to us, I think that they got released, as you know, to the whole world as soon as possible.
So, Congressman, let me ask you about your initial reaction here to this news. I mean, what are you looking for as we, and again, we're being very cautious as we report out kind of what we're seeing here in these files, and we'll of course bring the news as we've sifted through it. But the fact that they did, in some capacity, meet this deadline today, but they are saying also that there's going to be more after today that doesn't seem to meet the deadline. Your reaction?
Yeah, I think that's unacceptable. I think everything should be released all at once. They've had years to prepare this, and certainly 30 days to get this ready to be released to the public. So any foot dragging, any excessive redactions or tampering would be in contradiction of the law. In terms of what I'm looking for, I actually went to the DOJ website just now to start looking. And the thing that I'm looking for are financial records. There's $1 billion of financial transactions associated with this just ghastly child sex trafficking ring. And so what I'm looking for is who got paid what and for what purpose. I think you got to follow the money to really understand what has happened. And up to this point, we have not seen the financial records associated with this horrible child sex trafficking ring.
And you don't have financial records from the Epstein estate?
No, not yet. Although it's possible they might still release them. They've been releasing them on a rolling basis. And so I'm hopeful that there will be more of that. But I think that is really, to me, the heart of kind of what has happened in this whole, horrible episode. And that gives us clues as to who might still be out there that poses a risk to people. I mean, the survivors have been incredibly eloquent when they came to Congress and telling us that perpetrators of this child sex trafficking ring are still in our midst. They gave us a variety of names, so I'm sure that we'll be looking for those names as well within these records. But I think they really stiffened our resolve, Democrats and Republicans, to get to the bottom of what happened and hopefully give them some measure of justice.
One thing that your committee did not specify, or that this law that Congress passed did not specify, is what's the penalty if the Department of Justice does not meet its obligation to release all of the files by today, being the deadline. And your side of the aisle, Oversight and Judiciary Democrats, put out this statement saying, quote, "We are now examining all legal options in the face of this violation of federal law." One of your colleagues seemed to suggest that the prison time for the Attorney General might be on the table. And what do you think are the best options?
Well, first of all, I hope they comply today. If they don't, there are different remedies, including going to court. There's precedent for that, as you know, and Congress and Democrats have gone to court to force the administration to comply with the law. A good example is, for instance, we have the ability under the appropriations law to perform congressionally obligated oversight and inspection of ICE detention facilities. That had been in dispute with the Trump administration. A court finally ruled in our favor, and today I actually inspected an ICE detention facility for myself. So if that type of court process is required, we'll do it. Whatever it takes, we need to get to the bottom of what the law requires and get all the files.
One thing that one of your colleagues on the Oversight Committee actually told us here in the arena is that the committee possesses photographs of sexual acts being conducted. Have you seen such photos?
No, I have not yet.
Do you know if they exist?
I don't. I know that a lot of material has been redacted, and we are redacting materials as well, but I have not seen those myself.
One other question is whether some of the prominent Democrats that are named in some of these documents may come to Congress in some capacity, including, of course, the Clintons. Do you think that the Clintons should come and speak with the committee?
Yes, I think anybody who's implicated in this particular situation who could shed light on what has happened needs to cooperate with the committee. Because again, it's about getting justice for the survivors, but also it's about preventing this from ever happening again. And we have to do everything we can after 20 years of this saga to finally do something material to do justice for the victims.
Congressman, I want to thank you very much for your time. If you're willing to stand by, as you mentioned, you're looking through these files yourself. As we get more information here, I would love to have additional reaction from you throughout the hour. I do want to expand our conversation for a couple of minutes, but thank you. And do let the control room know if you're willing to stand by for us.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Jeff Zeleny, I want to talk about kind of the politics of this for President Trump, because this has been something that has just dogged him and has been one of the first examples we've probably seen of his base splintering from him in any way. What is your sense, what's your reporting about how the White House is kind of bracing for this, what they know or don't know about what the public's about to see?
Look, they're very apprehensive about it. I think Susie Wiles probably said it best in one word earlier this week in the Vanity Fair explosive piece that Pam Bondi whiffed on this. And that's been kind of a word that really could be used to describe the entire administration's reaction. Imagine if this had been dealt with earlier in the year. It would be long behind them. But it is now just a few days before Christmas. This clearly is going to bleed into the new year. So the politics of it, and of course there are many more important things aside from the politics, but just right now the politics of this are not good for the president, because the reality here is this was the first example when the House voted to release these overwhelmingly. It was the first real example of House Republicans effectively rolling the president on this. I mean, Thomas Massie of Kentucky led the charge, and others as well, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Nancy Mace, Lauren Boebert, all the Democrats to release these, and then the train left the station here. So for the president himself, I would assume that they know everything that's in the files, because their Justice Department obviously has had the entire year to look at them. But it's just a remarkable series of really comedies of errors here that everything led to this, and now they're being forced into this position on the defense as opposed to just kind of doing it at the very beginning. Because again, this is something that his own base wanted, and it was really a soundtrack of the campaign. We all remember from rallies and things, this meant a lot to people, and then once they came into office, they just kind of didn't take that seriously, and now this is what is playing out. Yeah, and Brian Lanza, you have the distinct disadvantage of being the one Republican sitting on our panel today. We're very grateful that you're here. This can't be a good day for the White House.
Yeah, listen, I think Jeff is right. What Susie said earlier in the week is a major whiff, and this is an example that's been a whiff for several months now, and it accumulated today. The release valve is being released. There'll probably be a few more stories, I suspect, if nothing's really directed to the president, and then we'll move on to the next issue. But it has absorbed a tremendous amount of energy, and you're right. It was the first example of the base, at least the congressional base, offering some type of check and balance to the president.
Yeah, it seems rather optimistic that, just in a few days, this is all going to be behind us after it's strung out for months and
Trump
months.
wrote, it's always something next.
Let's watch a little bit of what Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, who, remember, used to be President Trump's personal lawyer, went down to interview Ghislaine Maxwell. After that interview, she was moved to a cushier prison. He was talking about the redactions of this material, because that, of course, is going to end up being incredibly closely scrutinized. So he was asked, are they going to take out references to President Trump? Let's watch.
Will every document that mentions President Trump, every picture of him, every video, every bit of information related to him in these files be released today or at some point in this process?
Assuming it's consistent with the law, yes. So there's no effort to hold anything back because there's the name Donald J. Trump or anybody else's name, Bill Clinton's name, Reid Hoffman's name. There's no effort to hold back or not hold back because of that. And so, but again, we're not redacting the names of famous men and women that are associated with Epstein.
What do you make of that, Elliot?
No, I think he's right. He's absolutely right there in that nothing that does not comport with the law can really be released. Along those lines, and it's something interesting that Ellie Honig had said a little bit earlier in the program about this idea of co-conspirators and other, there was the sweetheart deal that Jeffrey Epstein had gotten, and Ellie had mentioned that. One thing that Congress specifically requested and required in the law was information on co-conspirators and immunity deals, like deals that people got to not be prosecuted from this. And I'd be really curious to see in these hundreds of thousands of pages who else either was a subject of investigations and was not prosecuted, who else, in exchange for their testimony or cooperation with the government, might have struck a sweet deal with the government, or nobody else. But that's the kind of information that, after they cross out the names of who they shouldn't, that they should be putting out there, and he's right.
Yeah. Adrian Elrod, you have worked for Bill and Hillary Clinton in your career. How concerned are Democrats about what they're going to find in this material? Because, listen, this has clearly turned out to be a pox on everybody's houses. It's big tech, right. It's Hollywood, it's, it's both political parties. It's not just, constrained to one or the other.
Yeah, it certainly runs a whole political spectrum here. I mean, look, the Clintons have been very forthcoming, especially President Clinton, that, he did not visit the island. We have certainly seen some photographs, but I think the Clintons feel, very good about, that he was not, he knows that he was not involved in any of this stuff. And of course, you saw Susie Wiles make it very clear in Vanity Fair this week that this is a nothing burger and we need to quit talking about that. But I think it's also interesting to see Todd Blanche. The White House seems to have lost faith and confidence in Pam Bondi. You see Todd Blanche going out there. He's the one who seems to be the face of going out and talking about, these files. He's obviously trying to mention other people's names other than Trump, like mentioning Reid Hoffman there to try to divert from, all the exposure being on the Trump administration. But it does also seem to me that Pam Bondi has lost the faith and confidence from this White House, and they're putting Trump's former personal attorney out there.
Yeah, and for those who aren't aware, Reid Hoffman, of course, is Silicon Valley, a billionaire, I believe, who is, funds the Democratic Party. Many of them have started to fund the Republican Party. Brian, I think my question also for you is that, look, this was a law that Trump had to sign, right, to put these files out there, okay? There are pictures of Trump signing an executive order getting rid of paper straws. There are pictures of Trump signing an executive order to proclaim Gulf of America Day. There's pictures of him signing the piece of paper that changes the Department of Defense to the Department of War. In theory, we have these pictures somewhere. They do exist, but there is no picture of him signing this law. It does not exist.
You can't sign not everything needs to be public. Right, yeah.
Really?
You get to highlight what you want to highlight. And why would you highlight a loss?
Jeff?
But the law is signed, and the reality is whether there's a picture of it or not. I mean, I would put that in the same category as the president today did not answer questions. He knew this was coming, obviously. He's traveling to North Carolina later this evening, and then he's beginning a long holiday break in Mar-a-Lago. And just imagine that is where so much of this started. But I think what this is really going to just sort of regurgitate is, again, is just the close friendship that Donald Trump had with Jeffrey Epstein. And
But how's that new?
It's not. Right? It's not new. It's not new, but it's regurgitating it. That's my point. It's coming up again. And Alex Acosta, when you think back to the first Trump term, Alex Acosta, all of those federal documents from that first sweetheart deal prosecution is also going to be relitigated. So I'm not sure anything new is going to come out. We'll find out. We don't know. I'm sure there'll be something new. But the reality is just relitigating it. It may drive the president mad over break. Trying to choose my words here.
I was going to say, Jeff's being very precise with his word choice.
It's something that's very close to him.
We should all be monitoring the president's Truth Social feed as we are sitting down to Christmas dinner. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Okay. Let's bring in CNN National Enterprise correspondent MJ Lee. And MJ, I'm very glad that you're here because you've been recently talking with survivors of Jeffrey Epstein as this push to release the documents is really heating up, and centering them as the piece of this story that is the most important, I think, matters a lot. And we've seen kind of dribs and drabs from the House Oversight Committee. We've heard some survivors say that has been difficult for them to deal with. What are they preparing for here with this massive trove coming out today?
Yeah, Casey, this entire process has been incredibly emotionally challenging, at least for some of the Epstein survivors that I've been in touch with, as you mentioned, because this isn't sort of the first time that they have seen certain documents, certain files, photographs coming out that are related to Epstein. I think sort of the anticipation leading up to today has been really challenging, but I think the incremental releases have also been challenging. I'll tell you, the survivors have made clear, again, at least the ones that I have spoken with, that they feel it is really important that any identifying information, names about victims and survivors to be redacted. And, as we are going through these massive troves of documents, there are certain sections where you're just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and practically every page is redacted, which gives you a sense of how much information in here there is going to be that is related to Epstein victims, whether it is, written information about his victims, or in some cases it's clear that some of the potential victims' faces are being redacted and not shown. And I think that's just like a really painful reminder, again, about what you said, about how at the end of the day, we can talk about the politics, we can talk about what, big name, high profile folks we might encounter in these files. But at the end of the day, we really do need to bring this back to the survivors and the victims who suffered so much abuse and have been waiting so many years in some cases for any semblance of justice. I will also note, just on the issue of the redactions, I'm sure you've seen this too. I think you actually showed it on the screen earlier. There's a notice that says the DOJ basically tried to make all efforts possible to make sure that personal information pertaining to victims are held back from disclosure. But it says because of the volume of the information involved, the website may nevertheless contain information that inadvertently includes non-public, personally identifiable information. So if you're, just think about that. If you're a survivor, a victim, perhaps you are making the difficult decision to start going through some of these files, you're basically sort of being told, we can't guarantee that there might not be something that could be extra triggering. So all in all, just an incredibly challenging day for the folks that I've been in touch with. And finally, the fact that the DOJ is not releasing everything that it has, and the fact that it's guaranteed that it's not going to end today, but this is sort of just the beginning of the release of the Epstein files, that is very, very challenging for the folks I'm talking to as well.
And breaking news.
Welcome to the lead. I'm Jake Tapper. We're going to start with breaking news on our Law and Justice lead because just moments ago, the U.S. Justice Department released at least some of the many files it has on dead pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Our CNN teams are going through the released documents right now. We will bring you updates as we get them. This is a day that so many survivors and members of the American public have waited on for years, for decades. Tonight at midnight was the deadline for the Justice Department to release these files, but this morning it became clear that there might be at least one problem. Here is Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche this morning saying that all of the files are not going to be released today.
I expect that we're going to release more documents over the next couple of weeks. So today, several 100,000, and then over the next couple weeks, I expect several 100,000 more. There's a lot of eyes looking at these, and we want to make sure that when we do produce the materials we're producing, that we're protecting every single victim.
Okay, let's check in with the actual law that has required this release of the documents. It's called the Epstein Files Transparency Act. It passed 30 days ago with the support of every member of Congress except for one, Republican Congressman Clay Higgins. The law requires of the Justice Department and FBI, quote, not later than 30 days after the date of the enactment of this act, the Attorney General shall, subject to subsection B, make publicly available in a searchable and downloadable format all unclassified records, documents, communications, and investigative materials, unquote, that pertain to Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and other people or entities named in connection to them and the sex trafficking ring that they are alleged to have run. Now, you will notice in that law, it didn't say today was the deadline to release some of the records. It said all of the records, and it said with a searchable form. And if you go onto the website right now and just even put the word Epstein in to search the Epstein documents, that doesn't come up because it's not searchable yet. Let's discuss this all with CNN's Evan Perez and MJ Lee. MJ, what are we learning about the content of the files that have been released so far?
Yeah, Jake, we knew that today was going to be a really big document dump coming from the DOJ. But even having known that, when you take even a few minutes to go through these documents, it really is a pretty sickening experience. So much context is missing. So we're going to be really responsible in the coming minutes and hours to report on all of this responsibly. But in general, we are seeing lots of photographs and lots of documents that are clearly related to the various investigations that have taken place over the years about Jeffrey Epstein and the many allegations against him. Jake, the sheer volume of materials and the pages and pages of information that is redacted, again, just gives you such a reminder of how many people had accused him of abuse and how many people around him may have been aware of what he was up to. I just want to zero in on this idea of just the sheer volume of redactions that we are seeing. I was saying the last hour, you might click on a certain PDF file and you're scrolling for pages and pages just seeing black boxes, whether it's because there are written aspects that are being blacked out or photographs that are being blacked out. And among the things, as an important reminder, that could be redacted are identifying information about victims and also anything related to child abuse. Again, I want to be clear. Not all redactions are necessarily going to fall under those two categories, but it is an important reminder as we're seeing some of these photos, women that are clearly not dressed, sex toys of various kinds, information that victims and accusers were giving to investigators over the years of the huge breadth of what we are talking about here. And Jake, I will say just one thing that is really striking to me as I'm going through and looking through some of these documents and photographs is in my conversations with some of these survivors, of course, they're looking for transparency. They want justice. They've been waiting for this moment for so long. But keep in mind, for some of these survivors, they are going to be pouring through these documents looking for information about their own stories and their own cases. Some of them have memory lapses. That is not uncommon when you've gone through trauma. Not to mention, for some of them, the abuse took place many years ago. And I've been told, sometimes we're just looking for information that might be validating for us and that might sort of give us the confidence to say this thing that I remember from so many many years ago, I was right and I was telling the truth.
Yeah, very emotional stuff. Evan, what's the holdup on the Justice Department not releasing all the files today, not doing it in a searchable format? And, you know, if the three of us were told by law that we had to do something and we didn't do it, I don't think we'd be as nonchalant about it as Deputy Attorney General Blanche was. Is the Justice Department going to face any consequences for not abiding by the law, not fully meeting the deadline?
That, I think, will be left to the Republicans in the House as to whether or not there is any consequence to this, Jake. But, you know, what the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, does here, he notified Congress today as part of this release, basically telling them what they were providing and what they were not providing. First of all, he takes credit saying that this administration has been more transparent than any other in history, and also pointing out that previous administrations did not release this material. It's not clear that really they could have, because some of this stuff was under investigation and would have been a part of ongoing cases. So really this administration is the first that had this opportunity. But one of the things that I think is important to look at with regard to what the Deputy Attorney General is saying is what they're describing as the things that are not being released. And I think it's very important for us to discuss some of those. We'll talk a little bit about, he talks about the 200 Justice Department lawyers who went through all of this, and here's what he says is being withheld. Anything that contains personally identifiable information of the victims, depicted or child sex abuse materials, anything that would jeopardize an ongoing investigation. And then he goes through a number of privileges that will require them to withhold documents, which they say the law does not require them to do. He says, for instance, there's deliberative process privilege, product privilege, as well as attorney-client privilege. He also says anything that's national security information or foreign relations, diplomatic relations, that is also being withheld. The reason why I'm going through this, Jake, is because of this. We know that there's a lot of documents that I think we would love to see, including, for instance, a 2007 where a prosecutor in the Southern District of Florida prepared a 60-count indictment of Jeffrey Epstein. And it appears that that would fall under the deliberative product exception here that they're using to withhold. For instance, we know the FBI prepared interviews or wrote down interviews and produced reports on interviews with victims. A lot of that appears to be being withheld, or at least blacked out, because of these privileges. And so that is one of the things that I think we're going to see going forward, is the question of why can't we see that? Why is that being accepted? Because this law is pretty clear that that Congress meant for the public to see as much of this as possible.
Talk about blacking out. I don't know if I can get a close-up of my phone. This is one of the documents that the Justice Department released. It's 100 pages.
Right.
This is what it looks like. I don't know if you can see. It's all black. It's just 100 pages of redaction. That's the transparency we're getting here.
Right, and I'll point to there's a tranche of documents that is labeled Grand Jury New York, and it is completely black. And so again, we know that the courts have now made it possible for the Justice Department to release some of these documents. We understand, obviously, that there needs to be a protection that they need to release.
All right. Julie, for the Miami Herald, to help shine a light on the depth of the criminal enterprise of Jeffrey Epstein in terms of sex trafficking crimes. She's also the author of a great book on the subject, Perversion of Justice, the Jeffrey Epstein Story. I read it this year, highly recommended. Julie, the Justice Department says it will only be releasing several 100,000 documents today, not all of the documents as mandated by law. It's only a fraction of all the files on Epstein. And as I'm sure you've seen, there's quite a bit of redacting, a lot of heavy black pen. What's your reaction to what we've seen so far?
Well, my reaction is this isn't going to sow any confidence in the Trump administration or the Justice Department. I think the American public, the polls have shown that they believe that there is a huge cover up with this case. And I think when they see these kinds of large piles of pages that are completely blacked out, it only adds to their distrust of this, administration and the way that it's handling it.
Based on what we know so far and what Deputy Attorney General Blanche has said about what's not being released, do you have any confidence that the Justice Department will ultimately release everything it's supposed to release and only redact that which, by law, they're supposed to redact and nothing more?
No, I don't have a lot of confidence. Look, they haven't even explained to us why they moved Ghislaine Maxwell to this prison in Texas. So I doubt that they're going to give us a whole lot of new information with these files, given what we've seen so far. I mean, it is possible that they'll make a mistake. I think that that's where the only way that we might get some information is that they might accidentally not redact something that will give us clues that we hadn't had before about why this case, why the Justice Department never prosecuted him to the extent of the law that they should.
For the most part, the photos that were released today have been presented without context. How difficult do you think it's going to be to accurately understand what's going on for what we do see in the photos that haven't been completely blacked out?
I think it's really a dangerous thing to throw these photos all out there. It's really inviting people to, have these people, it's like this guilt by association thing that's going on. Look, there were a lot of people that hung around Epstein. We do not know whether all of them knew what he was doing. Many of them did know, however, but the photos themselves, I don't think in this case tell a story because they are out of context in many instances.
Julie, stand by. I want to bring MJ Lee back. MJ, you're getting new details about some of the photos in these documents. Tell us more.
Yeah, and this is just the beginning of our team starting to go through the massive trove of documents and photos. But one thing that we have already noticed, some never before seen photos of former President Bill Clinton are in these files. Let me just walk you through a couple of them. First, here is a shirtless jacuzzi. The other person in that photo is blacked out. We don't know that person's identity. There is another photo of Bill Clinton swimming in a pool with Ghislaine Maxwell. This seems to be sort of the zoomed out image of the first photo. The other woman, again, that person's face is redacted. And then here we have a photo of Bill Clinton appearing to hold a drink. I think that's covered up by the chyron right now, with, of course, Jeffrey Epstein in the background standing there next to him. Again, Jake, we do not know when these photos were taken. We have reached out to a representative for the former president for comment on these new images. And we also just want to be very clear that the former president has never been accused by law enforcement of any wrongdoing that is related to Jeffrey Epstein. And in the past, his spokesperson has repeatedly said that Bill Clinton cut ties with Epstein before his arrest on federal charges in 2019. Now, I just want to give you a sense of, as we are going through these files, these are the kinds of discoveries that we might be making in the coming hours. We are, of course, going to be interested in anything that is new, anything that might be revelatory about high-profile names, big people in public life. Again, though, it is incredibly challenging to try to report on some of these images and documents because there is so much context that is missing. But again, here we have what appear to be never before seen photos of Jeffrey Epstein in both of Bill Clinton, in Jeffrey Epstein's presence and Ghislaine Maxwell's presence. Again, we don't know the context around these photos when they were even taken.
All right, MJ, thanks so much. Please flag us down when you have more. Let's bring back Julie K. Brown of the Miami Herald. Julie, what's your take on these Clinton photos that have been released?
It's just hard to know. We don't know when they were taken or where they were taken, under what circumstances. But of course, the more that we see photos of him, the more questions with Epstein and in Epstein's houses, or we don't know where they are. And I think it just raises more questions about how close he was with Epstein, and the fact that, at some point he had to have known what Epstein's, crimes were. I mean, he had been accused for a long time, and it was known he was accused of molesting underage girls. So I think that, these raise more questions that I think he probably will be asked about these photos.
K. Brown, thank you so much. We're going to sneak in a quick break. We'll be right back with more on this developing story. The Epstein files have been released. What's in them? What can we learn? Stay tuned.
The Trump Justice Department has 1 week from tonight to comply with the law passed by Congress, compelling it to release all the files that it has related to the late sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. But ahead of that deadline for the administration, Congress is providing new insight this evening into just how expansive his orbit of rich and powerful friends actually was. None of the men that you're about to see are accused of wrongdoing. That's important to note. But Democrats on the House Oversight Committee have released these pictures from Jeffrey Epstein's estate, citing the need for transparency. One of the images that we got today shows the president, of course, before he was president, in a crowd with Jeffrey Epstein. Another shows him with several women whose faces have been blurred, the committee says, to protect their identities. And that's the case in several of the pictures that we're actually seeing tonight. There's another image with Trump with another woman, and in these images that are turned over by the Epstein's estate. And there's one also showing Bill Clinton posing with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell at an event. There are several showing Jeffrey Epstein with Steve Bannon, Trump's former chief strategist from his first term in office. The famous names and faces continue as we looked through these photos that were released this morning. Woody Allen, Bill Gates, Richard Branson, Larry Summers all show up. There are tens of thousands more, though, that we are told that have not been released yet by the committee. Democrats released several throughout the day. Mostly they show rooms and images around Jeffrey Epstein's now infamous private island. And in the Oval Office tonight, the president himself was asked what he thought about these new photos.
Well, I haven't seen it, but I mean, everybody knew this man. He was all over Palm Beach. He has photos with everybody. I mean, almost, there are hundreds and hundreds of people that have photos with him. So that's no big deal. I know nothing about it.
The president moved on to other questions, but there were also pictures today that were part of this release of novelty condoms, including one that is clearly visible with the president's face on it. You can read for yourself what it says. In these images, total, we got 92 pictures from the Democrats out of some 95,000 we know that they obtained from Jeffrey Epstein's email account and one of his laptops. The White House has responded tonight by accusing congressional Democrats of cherry-picking photos to create what they claim is a false narrative. I'm going to ask a top Democrat about that in a moment. But in the meantime, one of the loudest Republican voices on this issued a warning today, saying that the secret grand jury material that judges have recently cleared for release, they believe is not going to be enough.
The grand jury material is just a small fraction of what the DOJ needs to release, because the FBI and DOJ probably has evidence that they chose not to take to the grand jury, because the evidence they're in possession of would implicate other people, not Epstein or Maxwell. What we want to see are the facts and evidence that the FBI and the DOJ have never given to a grand jury.
Starting us off tonight, my lead source is the top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee, Congressman Robert Garcia. And thank you so much for being here, because when you see these pictures, when you go through them, what do you think the significance is of these images?
Well, I think first it's very important that when we receive anything, whether it's from the Epstein estate or other sources, we've got to put it out to the public. This is an investigation that deserves transparency, and the survivors deserve justice. It's been months and months since we've had a subpoena on these documents. We have, of course, this new law that was bipartisan that got passed, and yet the president has not acted on the full release of the files. He could do so tonight and today. These pictures, of course, just continue to raise additional questions. Some of them are quite, I think, disturbing about the relationships that Jeffrey Epstein had with powerful men. You'll note that we have said from day one that we don't care who are in these files, what political party they're in, how much wealth they have, who their connections are. We're going to release the information. We're going to hold those that cause harm, that in some cases abuse and rape women and children. We're going to hold them accountable. We're going to get justice for the survivors. And everything that we release just adds more information about who Jeffrey Epstein was, the people that he surrounded him with, and clearly he had connections to very powerful people. I want to say one last thing. We also have numerous bank records, and those bank records we're going through right now will hopefully also get us a lot more information about the connections between who was paying Jeffrey Epstein and for what.
Have you learned anything from those bank records yet, or is it still you're still sorting through that?
They're pretty complex records. We're actually working with both the Senate Finance Committee and also the House Financial Services Committee right now to go through all of the documents. And we have right now bank records from two different banks, Deutsche Bank and JP Morgan. We need 20 additional banks to be subpoenaed. And we've asked Republicans, Chairman Comer, to please work with us on a bipartisan subpoena to those banks. So we have yet to hear from him on that. We're glad that two other banks are moving forward, but we know that we need information from all of those banks to get the clear financial picture of who was paying Jeffrey Epstein, what individuals, possibly foreign governments, what large organizations, and was there money laundering or other financial crimes happening throughout this whole process.
One thing that the Republicans on your committee have accused you of, and the White House as well, is cherry picking certain pictures, they say to form a narrative here. How did you decide which pictures in the 95,000 that you now have access to, how did you decide which ones to release today?
You know, I think it's interesting that Republicans like to make these arguments when they have yet to call on President Trump in a strong way to release all the files. They wanted to conceal the files. They wanted to oppose our subpoena. They tried everything they could to stop our vote in the Congress to actually get the files released. And so every step of the way, Mike Johnson, the chairman of our committee, James Comer, and Donald Trump have actually been a part of this massive cover-up. So we should be very clear about that. As far as the photos, we've actually only reviewed about a fourth of the 95,000 photos that were actually sent to us late last night. And so as we're going through those photos, we're putting more photos out to the public. We put out some this morning, some later tonight. We'll continue to put out photos in the days and weeks ahead. Our goal is to get everything that we can release out to the public. And some of what was sent to us in this documentation is also quite disturbing. And so we have to be very thoughtful and careful about how we protect the survivors and how we protect the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. That, to us, is the most important thing.
When you say it's disturbing, can you explain why?
What I can say is Jeffrey Epstein was clearly a sick person, a horrible sex trafficker, and so was Ghislaine Maxwell. Like I said earlier, the photos are disturbing. There are clearly many photos of women. And those pictures, we have to ensure that we are protecting those survivors. And our hope is to be able to get the information about what is included in the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photos that have been released by the Epstein estate, some very disturbing, of women and their conditions, which we hope to be able to share in the days and weeks ahead.
Well, I mean, wow. I mean, it sounds like you're saying there's potentially images of women being assaulted or in sexual acts.
I think what I would say is that there are very disturbing photos, and there are many of those photos we have of not just of the island, which you showed earlier, but also of women. And I think it's something that is concerning to us because at the end of the day, we're going to protect the identities of the survivors, and we're working with the survivors very closely to ensure that we don't reveal information that could be damaging to any of them. And so it's incredibly important that we center the survivors and that we do not release information or materials that puts any of them in any harm's way. it's also important for public transparency that we do everything we can to push out the information to the public. And so we're doing that right now. And what should happen, and Thomas Massey is right, if we really want to get justice here, the DOJ has to release what they have, because what they have is enormously larger than what we have right now through the Epstein estate or any other sources.
Well, I wonder about that, because when y'all released the emails last time that showed correspondence with people like or about Donald Trump, with Ghislaine Maxwell, with Larry Summers, the Deputy Attorney General came out and basically said they didn't have that in their possession. It wasn't really clear why the Justice Department wouldn't have these emails, if no one thought to subpoena them until your committee did. But do you actually think the committee has these images from the Justice Department has these emails from his estate?
So that's actually something that we're not exactly sure. I mean, first, let's be clear. I don't trust Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General. This is a person that was Donald Trump's former personal lawyer. The way he's treated Ghislaine Maxwell, involved in possibly moving her to a less secure prison, essentially where she can roam around and have pets and have secret meetings. I mean, that is ridiculous and outrageous. She's a sex trafficker. And so Todd Blanche needs to be investigated himself for these actions. Separate of that, whether or not the Department of Justice has the documents the Epstein estate has, he has said that they don't have many of these documents. That may be true. I don't trust everything that Todd Blanche says, but I imagine that the DOJ has some of the documents, but they may not have everything. And so we're not gathering information or waiting for the DOJ to send us documents. We're talking to the Epstein estate. We're talking to the Virgin Islands. We're talking to survivors directly and getting testimony. We're bringing in people into our committee and getting information and depositions. And one last piece. There are hundreds and hundreds of FBI agents who love their country and are patriots and that have helped to put together the Epstein files. So Pam Bondi and Donald Trump need to understand that if they try to hide, redact, or in any way tamper with evidence, there are good Americans out there that are ready to call that out.
We'll see. They have 1 week left to produce those. Congressman Robert Garcia, the ranking member on House Oversight, thank you for joining us tonight. And here to weigh in as well, Van Jones and Scott Jennings. And Van, I mean, I just think when you hear that from Congressman Garcia saying that there's some really disturbing images.
Yeah.
In this, I mean, their staff has to go through this basically in a raw file and look through that and put stuff out. I mean, it's created a stir. The Republicans are saying they're just cherry picking, but I mean, I do think it's just disturbing to even see a lot of these pictures.
Well, I think that there are two things that are going on here. One is, everybody that's seen this stuff says there's really terrible images here. They're saying that on air, they're saying that off air, terrible images. And so I think that, to me, they should be a little bit more patient. I do think they open themselves up by putting some out now, some out later. I don't understand the rationale. If it's this serious, I think Democrats would be well advised. If it's worse than people thought, dribbling out little party pictures and doing guilt by association games, I think undermines the seriousness and the gravity of what we're talking about now.
Well, and Scott, I mean, that was the concern that's what Marjorie Taylor Greene basically alluded to when she was asked about the president fighting her on signing that Epstein discharge petition. She told him she was worried people would get hurt. Obviously, one thing that Republicans have argued is that people could be unfairly smeared by being included in this. I mean, you saw Richard Branson, a lot of people who were included in these photos today that have not been accused of wrongdoing. That is incredibly important to note, even for a second time. But Scott, I wonder what you make of the argument that it's being cherry picked. I mean, the DOJ could release this theoretically tomorrow.
Yeah, look, here's what I think. Robert Garcia and the Democrats on oversight don't care about justice. They don't care about victims. They don't care about anything except one thing. They care about making the American public think that Donald Trump had something to do with this. What Van said is incredibly accurate. They should be patient. If they cared about victims and they cared about a narrative of justice and they cared about that part of it, they would be patient and they would be measured. But what did they do today? They release photos that are cherry picked, by the way, and they throw in an already publicly released photo of Donald Trump. They blur out the pictures of the women to make you think that these women were underage sex victims when in fact they were very adult. They were at an event. It's already a publicly released photo. And one of the women said on the record, oh, Donald Trump was gentlemanly. So what the Democrats are doing here is they're taking a very serious story in which real people got hurt by powerful people, all for the purpose of trying to smear Donald Trump. That's what this has always been about. They didn't care about it until now. And what they're doing with these photos is nothing short of outrageous. This is not a story about Trump and Epstein. It's a story about Epstein, but they want it to be about Trump. And I'm just, honestly, it is crazy. When you put out photos and digitally alter and react to faces, you know what you're doing, and it's not right.
Go ahead, Van.
Look, I didn't like a lot of what I saw today, mainly because I think when you're saying you have horrible images and then you're putting out images that frankly are pretty frivolous images, I think it steps on the message. But I do think it's important to point out all of this could go away tomorrow if Donald Trump just said release all of it. And the reason that we're having that you're now at the effect of whatever Democrats want to do is because Republicans don't want to do anything at all. And so I just think we're seeing the worst of the elite class. I think people at home who have faith and confidence that somebody's flying the plane here that has good sense and good judgment have to feel a lot worse about the country today, seeing how much nonsense is going on both behind closed doors in the past and now what's happening in the public eye. But if Republicans don't like what Democrats are doing, there's a solution. Just have Donald Trump release all of it right now.
Scott, can I ask you, because when I looked through the pictures today, CNN, you can look through them yourselves on CNN.com. They're published there. It's not just that one picture that you're referencing where there's 3 women on each side of the president. There's others where they blurred women's faces as well, where Trump's not in the picture. I mean, I just think it made me think back to the DOJ memo from July when they were saying they weren't going to release anything else. It started all this. And the Justice Department said the images that they had showed videos of victims who are either minors or appear to be minor. I mean, it's obviously hard for them to really discern at times in these old pictures how old the women or the girls are. Right?
Okay, so if it's hard to discern that, then why are you releasing it? A. B, as Van just said, many of these pictures are frivolous, publicly available pictures or pictures that were taken in public spaces that clearly have nothing to do with the victims or what happened to them or the people who perpetrated crimes against them. They have only one thing to do with, and that's smearing Donald Trump. They have tried to create a narrative that Trump had something to do with Epstein, and all we now know is that a lot of Democrats had something to do with Epstein, whether it was Summers or Obama's lawyer, who was Epstein's great defender, apparently, or on and on and on and on. But what you're seeing here is the creation of a.
Are they? I understand what you're saying, that they're trying to do it to stick it to Trump. But I mean, they're releasing pictures of Bill Clinton and Larry Summers and Democrats too. I think you could make that argument maybe more if it was just pictures of Donald Trump, right?
Well, look, those guys are already roadkill. I mean, I hate to tell you, but we already know about that. But they continue to stick things about Donald Trump in the middle of these other people for one reason only. There's not a single shred of evidence or any credible allegation that Trump did anything wrong at all or had anything to do with this, period. And by the way, he did sign the law they're going to release the documents on. So the idea that he doesn't want to release it, he signed it into law, and I assume they're going to release it as soon as they can.
We'll see. Under massive pressure, he did it. We'll see.
Out front next, breaking news. Trump speaks out about the newest Epstein photos hours after the release of images showing Trump and other high-profile men, including Bill Clinton, at Epstein's home. 2 Epstein survivors are out front tonight to respond. Plus, an out front exclusive this hour, the mother of Caroline Leavitt's nephew. She was detained by ICE, and she is here tonight for her first live television interview. Does she believe she was targeted? Her story is incredible. And actress Ricki Lake, she lost everything in the LA fires, her house gone, including her family photos. But then a woman who is a complete stranger found a trove of them. And she's my guest. Let's go out front. And good evening, I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, the breaking news. We've just got more than 70 new photos from the Jeffrey Epstein estate. These have just been released here in the past hour, following on the heels of about 24 others released earlier today. And some of these photos serve as the newest evidence of President Trump's long relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. House Democrats releasing the newly obtained photos, and Trump was asked about them just a few moments ago.
I haven't seen it, but I mean, everybody knew this man. He was all over Palm Beach. He has photos with everybody. I mean, almost There are hundreds and hundreds of people that have photos with him, so that's no big deal. I know nothing about it.
Of course, among the people with photos with Epstein is Trump himself. And of course, it is important. One new photo released today that had been in Epstein's possession shows Epstein and Trump standing shoulder to shoulder. Another shows Trump with 6 women wearing leis. The women's faces were redacted by the committee, but you see Trump there. There's a photo of Trump with another woman whose face is blacked out on a plane. And then there was a photo that Epstein kept as well, a bowl of novelty condoms with a caricature of Trump's face on the wrapper. And the words, quote, can't believe I have to read this. I'm huge. The condoms are in a bowl with a sign that says Trump condom $4.50. And even as you laugh to think about the fact, again, that this was in Jeffrey Epstein's possession, it's disgusting. Of course, it wasn't just Trump. Epstein also had a photo of himself and Steve Bannon, and this was Trump's point, that a lot of people knew him. There was another one that was a picture of Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and others with former President Bill Clinton, who, of course, also spent plenty of time with Epstein. There are photos of Epstein with Woody Allen and a photo of the former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers on a plane as well. Now, none of the released images in this case depict any specific sexual misconduct. It's also not clear when or where they were taken or who took them. But despite Trump trying to downplay it today, right, when he says it's no big deal and hundreds of people took photos with Epstein, right, the takeaway from that would be, oh, you know, who knows anything with him, just a really quick photo, lots of people had them. But the thing about it is that Trump was not just one of hundreds of people that Epstein took photos with, right? They knew each other, and they knew each other well, and they knew each other over a long period of time. Listen to what we have heard time and time again from people who knew them in those years.
They were best friends.
They were best friends.
Was his best friend.
And of course, that friendship was specific and important, but a lot of powerful men also had relationships with Epstein, which is why there is such a massive push for more information that Trump once had been at the forefront of. Once he had the power to release the files, which he has since he took office, any day he could have released them. All he had to do was say so. But here we are. Just listen to Trump's former ally, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene.
He was extremely angry at me that I had signed the discharge petition to release the files. I fully believe that those women deserve everything they're asking. They're asking for all of it to come out. They deserve it. And he was furious with me.
What did he say?
He said that it was going to hurt people.
He said to you, people will get hurt.
People will get hurt. I don't know what that means. I don't know who they are.
Out front now, 2 Epstein survivors. Danielle Bensky was recruited when she was 17 to give Epstein a massage at his townhouse on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. She was an aspiring ballerina. Her mother had just been diagnosed with a brain tumor, and Epstein told her he would help her mother if she brought in more girls. And Haley Robson says Epstein assaulted her when she was 16 years old. She was a high school student in Florida then, giving her an ultimatum to bring him a girl every day. She felt powerless just to imagine that, 16 years old. Also with me tonight, Stacey Schneider and Charlie Dent, and I appreciate all of you. Danielle, I can only imagine, and you know, having had the chance to speak with you over these past months, what it's like for you to the drip of information every day for you. You don't know what every day is going to bring, and today all of a sudden all these photos.
I mean, you know, the best way I can explain it is it feels like, you know, when you're in line at the DMV and you know you're going to have to wait. So you set yourself up to wait, and you tell yourself, like, at the end of all of this, we have that 19th deadline in our heads as survivors, and we figured we would not be seeing anything until then.
The 19th of December, when supposedly the DOJ releases.
The DOJ should be releasing everything. Everything should come to light that day, which is just next Friday, right? So we really were thinking, okay, I'm prepared to mentally, like, it's not going to be easy to see any of this stuff come forward. We know how, like, it's always going to be so painful, but we've prepared ourselves mentally to be able to do that on that day. And I think after talking to so many survivors today, this constant, we don't know what is going to pop up and when. So, like today, for instance, You know, I thought I was going to have a normal day and not do media. And then by like noon, I was scrolling and I see that picture of Steve Bannon sitting in Epstein's office.
That one was really striking to you. 'Cause
It
you've been
was.
there.
I've been at the office. The office has a lot. It holds a lot for me because it was, as we've talked about so many times on your show, that my mom was diagnosed with a brain tumor. He never paid for any of her care. He never did anything to help her, but he did threaten me so severely in that moment, and it happened in that office. And then to see a political figure who should be protecting our country sitting in that very spot is really appalling. And I think that like there's no way that you could be in that house and be, I mean, he was, like the way the design and the architecture was, he was literally like right across the hall from the massage room. So there's no way that you could enter that house and not know what was going on. So at the very least, you're witnessing something and you're complicit in it.
Haley, what was today like for you?
I wasn't surprised at all. I wasn't shocked. I found some of the photos to be quite salacious, especially with the toys. And all I could think about were the other survivors that would find that triggering or had a response to that. And I couldn't help but feel as a collective what they were going through in that moment, seeing these photos. And you know, it is a trickle effect. And this is why I am so committed to healing and to seeing a therapist, is because you can't, as an American and as a human being, you cannot look at these photos, whether involved or not, and not have a reaction and not feel devastated or just grossed out. And so I kind of felt a little like that today. And then I had to take a deep breath and brace myself and said, okay, this is a teaser. This is just a little preview. There's more that's going to follow. And we just all need to stay united and keep supporting each other and just keep being there for each other, because the more information that comes out, it could be very triggering for a lot of us.
Stacey, you know, when Danielle's talking about the office and having even just to see a photo like that and the unbelievably horrible experience she had, the memory for her, she also was talking about something that is consistent with what the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said. Right? In his belief, everybody knew. Nobody knew that, and that there were tapes, and he had a whole theory. But what she just described there, because she's been in that house so many times, was that when you went in and you're in his office, right across the hall is a massage room, that you could see one from the other. That particular picture, I guess it happened to be Steve Bannon with him in his office, but obviously many people would have been there. I just think it's so powerful what she said, just the physical proximity, that anyone who knew that was in that office knew about the massage room.
Right. It's stunning to hear that. I'd never heard that before, about the proximity of the room and then people coming in and out of his office. This is such a difficult situation because there are going to be plenty of people in those photographs. The House Oversight Committee already seized 95,000 photographs from Epstein's computer and emails just by subpoenaing his estate. So there's going to be a lot more coming out. What they did today, what their initial tease, they sent out 19 photos, like you described, Bill Clinton and Donald Trump in them, and some other famous, well-known people. There's no indication of any criminality in those photos, and there's no context for those photos. But I believe that the House Oversight Committee was sending a message to the administration, to Pam Bondi, and to the Justice Department that we've got a stash of evidence and information that we know exists. And if you play funny business in releasing this file and taking advantage or over advantage of all those loopholes that they were given in the law to release the files and not telling the public what's really in there, we have it on this side, on the other side of the other subpoena. And I think it was a subliminal message or a veiled message that we're watching you and we want to make sure you do the right thing by the public.
In terms of putting out what the DOJ has, Charlie, which we know to be a massive amount of information, right? Ro Khanna has made clear many times that, you know, it's what we've seen is 3% of what they have. We don't know how much of what the DOJ has is also what the estate may. I mean, we don't know the full Venn diagram on all of it, but we know that there's a lot
that they have, that when they say they're so transparent, obviously that's not true, right? They could put them out any day. They haven't. But what do you think, what do you make of the House committee putting this out? And specifically, it was the Democrats on the committee.
Well, today, but what I saw, I didn't learn anything today that I didn't kind of already know.
Right, you knew that
I knew
Trump
about
and
he had
Epstein were friends. You knew
relationships with people.
Clinton and
I mean,
Epstein,
you know,
yeah.
The condoms, I didn't see that coming. But other than that,
yeah. Well, at least you didn't have to read it.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, look, I said from day one, this administration and their allies have hoisted themselves on their own conspiracy petard. It was Bongino, it was Patel, it was Bondi, all telling us about Epstein files, and then they said when they got in the positions of power, oh, there's nothing to see here. The problem is that a lot of their base supporters believe them. And I think right now, this administration should have released this stuff a long time ago. Bad news doesn't get better with time, and they're waiting, and I'm anxious to see what they do on the 19th. I'm sure they're going to scrub this, they're going to redact this, they'll sanitize it any way they can, and then they'll release whatever they release. And I'm sure it's never going to be enough, because a lot of people are going to say they're hiding something. And given what's
people who are going to know, I mean, people like you, Danielle, you're going to know, right? So if they redact to not hurt people, is what Trump said, okay, that would be redacting your name. I mean, you've chosen to put your name and face out here. So is Haley. So have so many other survivors, but some have not. Their names should be redacted, faces redacted, right? But you're going to read through things in there, and you're going to know if it's all there.
I do think that's something that's been frustrating for survivors. Well, first of all, we're all in this together, and that has been something magical that has been born out of this. Just seeing Haley's face like now is just incredible to know we have that camaraderie and that sistership. But I think something that we are a little bit frustrated with is I put the FOIA request in for my 302, which is the FBI file, right? I requested my FBI file, my own file.
Your own, the stuff about
me.
you.
I'm not asking for anything else, just me. And I put that request in September, and we haven't, many of us, I don't actually know a single survivor who has seen their own FBI file. And so what that means is we're living off of our memory, which dates can get a little fuzzy. I know I talked to law enforcement in 2008. 2008's a long year. That's, 365 days of going through whatever we possibly can find. So that is a little bit frustrating in that we are a unit, and we are moving through this together, and we will be looking out for each other, and we will be, okay, here is so-and-so, and this is what happened here. But at that same time, nobody's making it very easy, and there's no roadmap for this. So it's going to be trial by
Stacey,
fire.
what do you make what she's saying here? That since September for her own FBI file.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And you know what's a real shame here? Based on what you're saying, the administration, it's a law. They need to put out the file. If they don't do justice and they put out a fully scrubbed, redacted file next week, why should the burden
or
have
incomplete,
to switch?
right?
Incomplete, or they say it's an ongoing investigation against these Democrats that Trump ordered, so we can't release this aspect of the file. And then what that does is it puts the burden on the survivors of having to come forward when maybe some of them aren't ready or don't want to come forward. The burden should never be put on them to correct the record and make it straight. The burden is on the Justice Department to give a correct record and abide by the law. And there's just been so much signaling and behavior that indicates that they're going to not do right by the public. And that's the prediction, I think, from most people.
I mean, Haley, obviously you've noted before you voted for Trump, obviously, and thought perhaps that those files would come out right away, something that he could do anytime, right? And at this point, obviously, he's chosen not to do so. But what about Stacey's point, right? That you and Danielle, you've been on this show many times. You've done media interviews, right? You're putting yourself out there every day at cost to your own life, to re-traumatizing, to triggering, to all of those things, because of the absence of transparency from the government.
I mean, I've just been doing this for so long, and I actually called the Beach Sheriff's Department to get my file and records years ago, and they told me that they had referred it to the FBI. They had to hand everything over to the FBI. I haven't put in a application to get my records, but you're absolutely right. To her point, this is asinine. I don't understand why the DOJ and the FBI are not being put under an extreme investigation as to why, as an American citizen and as a survivor of Epstein, why these girls are going through trauma, including me, and now we're being denied our records, our personal records that we want So when the records do come out, we can compare and contrast to our stories and what's in the records. And it's a shame that it's come down to this, and it's all tactic. This is all a tactic. The fact that it's now close to the deadline and the DOJ hasn't released, in my opinion, this is just another example of this administration weaponizing the DOJ for political gain. And it gets so exhausting when we as a collective are coming out and we're saying enough is enough. This is not political. Help us. And it's been, I mean, we've been to the Capitol, Danny, several times, and I've been there when these girls and these women are expressing to Congress, I want my files. I want my FBI files. Yeah. Why isn't that being talked about enough? Why 3 months into it are we still not receiving our FBI files? What is the DOJ doing? And why is this administration continuing to play these games and to delay and to distract? You got a week, 7 days, and we're not letting up.
So Charlie, I mean, what do you make of that? I mean, and can Thomas Massie, as a Republican right now, leading the charge, obviously you've got Ro Khanna and Garcia, you've got other Democrats working with him, but can he get this over the finish line?
Well, I think to a certain extent it's out of Massie's hands and Congress's hands. It's in DOJ's hands, and they're the ones who are going to release this. The question is, what does Congress do?
Right. Can Congress hold them accountable and make sure there aren't redactions or
Well, there are things
deletions.
They could do. As a former appropriator, you can do all kinds of things to fence their money, hold it up for DOJ until they do certain things. That would require Republican leadership, though, to step up and basically threaten the administration. If you don't give us those files, you're not going to get funding for things that you really care about. I mean, there are certain things that they can do to pressure them. I don't know that they would. I don't know that the leadership would do that. I'm sure Thomas Massie would if he were able to. Yeah. But that's where they are. But it's going to take some real muscle from Congress to force.
And we'll see after that discharge, where all of a sudden you went from 4 lone people for months to everybody but one. What would happen here? All right. Thank you all so very much. I appreciate it, Danielle and Haley. Thanks so much to both of you for being willing to come out and talk.
By law, the Justice Department now has just a week left to release everything it has on Jeffrey Epstein. Today, Democrats on the House Oversight Committee made their own contribution to the public record, putting out several dozen photos that were provided by the Jeffrey Epstein estate. Now, these are just some of the more notable ones. The ranking committee Democrat, Congressman Robert Garcia, calls them, quote, disturbing, and says they, quote, raise even more questions about Epstein and his relationships with some of the most powerful men in the world. To be clear, though, while the photos certainly do include photos of powerful men, the president included, the committee provides absolutely no captions or descriptions to put what we're seeing in any kind of context. And none of the men has ever been charged with any wrongdoing related to Epstein. None of the released images depict any sexual misconduct, nor believed to depict underage girls. For instance, there's this photo of then Citizen Trump with a woman on a plane, but no clue as to whose plane or which woman or when and where this was taken. There's also an image of him surrounded by women, all of whose faces have been obscured. Again, no information about who these women are in the photo, nor when and where this was taken. The president weighed in on the photos tonight.
Well, I haven't seen it, but I mean, everybody knew this man. He was all over Palm Beach. He has photos with everybody. I mean, almost, there are hundreds and hundreds of people that have photos with him. So that's no big deal. I know nothing about it.
There are photos as well of Epstein and conservative podcaster Steve Bannon, the president's former White House strategist and longtime booster, but again, no context to the photos. In one of them, we see a framed photo on Epstein's desk of a woman. Her face is concealed, apparently sprawled on a couch or the edge of a bed. Other photos show several more well-known Epstein acquaintances. This film director Woody Allen with Epstein, apparently a filming location. There's Epstein with the British billionaire Sir Richard Branson. There's a shot of Bill Gates with Britain's then Prince Andrew, though again, like all these photos, no context. This photo shows former President Bill Clinton, Jeffrey Epstein, accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell, and 2 other people. We should note that late tonight, Republican House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer threatened contempt proceedings against Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton if they don't appear for depositions on Epstein next week. Also among the photos, this one of a satirical Trump condom made by a New York novelty shop. One of those condoms is actually in the Smithsonian, though it's not on display. And more photos of Epstein himself, one in a tub, apparently taking a bubble bath, another at a bookstore, Barnes & Noble, apparently holding a book about himself over his face. Finally, there's this, unclear where it was taken, a GX99 massage therapy system. Joining me now, Democratic Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury, who sits on the committee that released the photos. Congresswoman, why did Democrats on your committee choose to release these photos now, and can you give any context around them? Do you know the context of them?
Yes, so I was briefed on this release this afternoon, and as I understand it, on Thursday afternoon, the estate notified the committee that they had additional documents to produce in response to the subpoena that the committee had issued. This would be the fourth tranche of documents that have been released. As you recall, the first was the birthday book. The second was flights, schedules, and a series of documents. And the third were the emails that were these explosive documents a few weeks ago. And so the latest is a set of photographs that seem to come from an iCloud account that Jeffrey Epstein held, as well as photos that were attached to emails. And as was explained to me by the attorneys from the committee, there was no context provided by the estate. So, there are 95,000 photos released by the estate. The attorneys went to New York to meet with the estate to authenticate that these were indeed from the estate, and they were released to the committee. As the attorneys explained to me, they are only about 10% through the entire photograph cache, and that there are many more very, very disturbing photographs, including potentially photographs of sex acts and other disturbing photos in this cache of documents. And so I don't know the specifics as to why the committee chose this representative few photographs, but certainly the photographs are quite disturbing.
And just to be clear, what you just said, you said that there are other photographs that attorneys are still going through, which may show actual sex acts. Are those attorneys for your committee, or are those from the Epstein estate? Has the Epstein estate actually handed over those images already?
Yes, they have. So this is an actual document production pursuant to the congressional subpoena. So we subpoenaed these documents from the estate, and they've been producing various documents in various tranches. So like I said, this is the fourth production, and the attorneys for the committee, which is a bipartisan set of attorneys, so both Democratic and Republican attorneys, went to authenticate the release of these documents.
So do you know how many more photos your committee has, and do you know when they may be released?
As was explained to me by the attorneys today, there's about 95,000 photographs were released by the estate yesterday.
So you have, I mean, there's only been, I don't know, a dozen or so photographs released now. So you have almost 94,000 or plus photos still to go through, or are going through.
As I understand it, that is what the staff and attorneys on the committee are going through right now, yes.
All right. Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joining me now, former federal prosecutor and professor at the Cardozo School of Law, Jessica Roth, and Julie K. Brown, award-winning investigative reporter for the Miami Herald. Her work was vital in exposing the extent of Epstein's sex trafficking ring. She's also the author of Perversion of Justice, the Jeffrey Epstein Story. Julie, when you hear that there are some 90, it sounds like almost still 95,000 or 94 more plus thousand photos still to be released, what do you make? I mean, that's a huge amount.
Well, they probably encompass quite a number of years. When he was doing his sex trafficking in Palm Beach, we know from my interviews with those victims that Ghislaine Maxwell, his accomplice, was taking a lot of photographs of those underage girls. They had reported that they were instructed at several points to pose provocatively in various stages of undress. And part of it sometimes was just to give Jeffrey a present, a birthday present or some kind of a gift with these pictures. She was with a camera all the time. I was told from some of these victims, so it could go back quite a ways. That was 20 years ago. So, and the police, by the way, when they raided his home back in 2005, his computers were already pulled out. In other words, he was tipped off. So they never got their hands on the photographs back then. They never got their hands on his computers, which presumably contained some of these photographs. So it's a long period of time probably that they have this information.
Jessica, why do you think some of the faces were redacted by the committee and others not?
We haven't been provided with a full explanation of that. I mean, that's among the many things that we don't have about the context for these photographs. I think the implication is that these may be redactions to protect the privacy of the survivors. We know that that is something that Congress is appropriately concerned about, and that the Department of Justice under the Epstein Transparency Act is permitted to make redactions for, but there hasn't been a clear statement.
And they have not said these faces are redacted because they are survivors.
That's my understanding. That certainly was not put out with the photographs, to my understanding thus far. But again, we don't have so much of the context for these photographs. We don't have the dates on which they were taken. We don't have where they were taken, or information about what was happening at the moment when the photographs were taken, sort of outside of the frame.
Right. I mean, some of these could be, public events that the people are just being photographed with, to the point that the president made. I mean, I think it's a fair point. Many people had photographs of Jeffrey Epstein.
Right. We need a clear statement from Congress about why they're making the redactions that they are, and more context to be able to appreciate the significance of these photographs that were released today.
Julie, the Department of Justice has a deadline, December 19th, to release the documents, as you well know, that it has in possession. Do you think they'll meet that deadline? And how much redaction? I mean, I guess there's no way to know what Pam Bondi is going to do and what kind of instructions she's following. But what's your hope, or what's your sense?
Well, I think that they are obviously going to have to release something. It's just a question of how much it's going to be redacted, or how much they're going to withhold, on the grounds that now, as you know, the president announced that they were going to do an investigation into Democrats. So that's an open criminal investigation. So they could use that as a reason to not turn over some of this material. But what I will say is the good part about the whole thing, there are two good pieces of good news on this, and that is that the Oversight Committee, quite frankly, is getting more information than I think is contained in the Justice Department files. I've always felt that the Justice Department really didn't investigate this case thoroughly from the very beginning. So we're probably getting more information from them, number one. And number two, we have the victims, and more of them are talking and coming out every single day. And they know what happened, and they are talking. And, it would behoove the FBI, for example, to start talking to some of these women and to really find out what Epstein was doing and who was involved and who was helping him.
And Julie, you're saying the committee's getting more information. Is that because they're getting it from the Epstein estate?
Yes, the Epstein estate is turning over. Like I said, I know, for example, when the investigation was in Palm Beach, they didn't get these photographs. They didn't get anything from his computer. So they're getting more information probably now than before, number one. And number two, we could compare it to what the Justice Department is going to turn over. For example, if the Justice Department says we didn't get anything on his computers, we know for a fact now that there was information on his computers. Right. So it's a little bit of a check and balance, I think, the fact that the Oversight Committee is getting this information.
I mean, Jessica, does it surprise you that it's the Oversight Committee which so far is putting out all this information?
Well, it doesn't surprise me in terms of how things have been progressing thus far. And certainly the fact that they released this material today keeps public attention on the Epstein matter and on the deadline of next Friday that the Department of Justice has to.
It certainly kind of raises the stakes for the Department of Justice in terms of what they're going to release.
And also, I think it bears noting that the Epstein Act that was passed by Congress requires the Department of Justice to make the material available in a searchable form, and also to identify sort of the people who are included in the material who are sort of politically sensitive, if you will. And so now that these photographs have been put out, in a sense, it's an invitation to people, once the Department of Justice makes its disclosure, to search the database sort of by those names, perhaps to see if there's the information that provides some of the context for these photographs. And that might be things like phone records or flight logs, things that would, or even emails, things that would help provide some of the information that helps us understand the significance of what's been released.
Yeah, Jessica Roth, thanks very much. Julie K. Brown, as always, thank you.
And good evening, I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, who is the Trump Department of Justice trying to protect? The DOJ releasing 30,000 more pages from the Epstein files, documents that are, again, heavily redacted, page after page of black. And among the redactions, something critically important. The names of the men who allegedly committed these heinous acts, still unknown, still protected, as are the names of what federal agents call Epstein's co-conspirators. According to one email with the subject, co-conspirators, the person whose signature line includes FBI New York writes, "When you get a chance, can you give me an update on the status of the 10 co-conspirators?" Then the response hours later comes and every name is blocked out. Now, it isn't who co-conspirators are. Also a mystery is why the DOJ felt the identities of all but 3 of them should be protected. But the Justice Department tonight is also determined to protect the president, spending hours today to prove that a letter purportedly written by Jay Epstein to convicted sex offender pedophile Larry Nassar, a letter that reads in part, "Our president also shares our love of young nubile girls." Now, at 1:30, the DOJ tweeted it was looking into the validity of this alleged letter from Jeffrey Epstein to Larry Nassar. That was their quote. 2 hours later, they posted another post on social media saying the FBI has confirmed this alleged letter from Jeffrey Epstein to Larry Nassar is fake. Fake. Now, this begs a lot of questions. How did the DOJ not know that before releasing the letter? It is confusing, to say the least, to think that when they're redacting content and only releasing files in dribs and drabs because they say they're taking such care with what they put out, to think that such a thing was released. And above all else, why isn't the DOJ spending as much time protecting victims, which the DOJ says with great moral fanfare is their top priority, as it is debunking a document it says is fake?
The statute also requires us to protect victims. Our process is simply that, to protect victims, making sure that victims' names and any of the information from victims is protected and redacted. If they have an issue with me protecting victims, they know how to get a hold of me. They know what we're doing to protect victims.
Meantime, tonight, the name of an Epstein victim remains unredacted in the files. We played that soundbite last night. We pointed out that her name was unredacted and that she'd called the DOJ and asked it to be redacted. And still, it hasn't been done. A victim who's never before been named until now, even after 2 days. 2 days after she told MJ Lee, our MJ Lee, who's been reporting on this, she told her she'd complained to the DOJ. She'd asked, have my name protected, please redact it. This is a mistake. It hasn't happened. So the question remains, who is the DOJ protecting and why? And why the priorities? The alleged crimes are unimaginable, the stuff of nightmares. One file detailing the alleged abuse from a survivor, which reads, "I was raped by Jeffrey Epstein. There were other men that raped me. I was kept in a stall so that men could look at me." That is horrific. It's from a document submitted by an advocacy group, but it is unclear if the FBI investigated it. Well, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, a vocal supporter of releasing all of the Epstein documents, wrote about that specific accusation on X, saying, "This is horrifying. Trump called me a traitor for fighting him to release the Epstein files and standing with women who were raped, jailed in stalls, and trafficked to men. Only evil people would hide this and protect those who participated. I pray for these women." And as for Trump himself, the documents thus far undercut something Trump said in January of 2024. He said at the time, quote, "I was never on Epstein's plane." And he went on to blame AI for reporting that he was. Well, now, according to a 2020 email from an assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, they say Trump flew on Epstein's plane 8 times. All right, out front now, Danielle Bensky, an Epstein survivor, a familiar face to our audience, one of the survivors who has worked tirelessly to get these documents released. Ryan Goodman also here, Stacey Schneider, and Barry Levine. But Danielle, let me just start with, when we go through this today,
more documents. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
More redactions. That's not a good thing. How do you feel about what's been put out there thus far?
I think survivors as a whole, we are feeling so frustrated with this whole process. And I mean, I'd like to remind everybody, this is a law. We had a law pass, and the DOJ is now breaking the law. This is not a slow rollout. This is not meant to be a few files here, a few files there. I mean, I understand 30,000 feels like a big number, but when you look at the whole, it's not. And so I think we're so frustrated on one side that nobody is communicating with us from the DOJ. We still haven't gotten our FBI files, our 302s, and so we're kind of in the dark as far as like, I'm looking for random dates all over the place. It's just the process has been so messy, and it just feels like an egregious oversight by the DOJ.
I mean, Ryan, oversight's one word. There are others you could come up with. I mean, well, first of all, this has been something that anybody at the DOJ would have thought Trump would have done on day one. They could have had a lot of time to prepare it. Even if they waited for all this fight, you had 30 days. And it feels like they waited till the last minute to start doing it in a rush way, which is the only way I can explain the kind of sloppiness of the redactions and a fake document being in there, whatever fake actually means. I mean, the 10 co-conspirators in that email that I just referenced, 7 of them they never identify in here. What's going on here?
It's difficult to know because we don't even know what the definition is of co-conspirators. We don't know what the FBI is using as that definition versus the DOJ.
Right.
But,
I mean, Ghislaine Maxwell was a convicted co-conspirator, but there could have been others who were not, malignant.
That's right. And in all likelihood, there are other co-conspirators. The FBI was aware of them, and the DOJ discussed whether or not to prosecute them. So seeing these documents is certainly consistent with what most close observers think. And there's another document that says that they, in fact, prepared an 86-page document on co-conspirator updates after Epstein's death, another document, a memo of co-conspirators we could potentially charge after Epstein's death, and then a corporate prosecution memo. So that's the question. I think that's what's also being held back. And the law says this should all have been revealed days ago in an unredacted form, at least with respect to only the redactions to protect the victims and the survivors, and we don't have it. And there's a list of what we need to have.
I mean, it is really incredible, Stacey, when you think about it. And then in the midst of it, there's this document that they say is not real, that they spent their day debunking about this, this letter that they say was fake, but from Epstein to Nasser.
Right. It's like the Justice Department is almost acting like Trump's personal attorney and PR firm. They got on this right away as soon as this got released, yet they're behind on meeting their statutory obligation to release the file on Friday. And that they spent that amount of time to jump on it, correct it, and protect the president, that's not what a document release is all about. Bill Clinton's photos got released, and there was nothing bad in the photos,
they were given prominent billing at the very start, right? First things out the door.
And they didn't bother to give any context to those, that those were innocent photos of him sitting in a swimming pool. He wasn't doing anything wrong. No one made a statement on behalf of Bill Clinton. Yet the Justice Department, who is supposed to, or which is supposed to be, involved in justice for victims and citizens of the United States, is working on the justice of protecting the president's image. And it's bizarre and disturbing.
Barry, as you've covered this for so long, what are the big questions you have tonight about those co-conspirators?
Well, Aaron, as Ryan pointed out, there is material in these files that we're supposed to see related to the co-conspirators. The fact is, we haven't really seen the meat and potatoes of that material. What concerns me most, Aaron, is in looking at the legitimate documents that we're seeing today, is that there's been so many missed opportunities. Why are the co-conspirator documents related to after the Miami Herald's Perversion of Justice series? Why weren't they focused on these men in 2008 when they first took over the case from the Palm Beach police? This is what is so upsetting. There's also a memo that the Palm Beach police first heard about Ghislaine Maxwell recruiting girls at a college campus in Palm Beach in December 2001. Why did it take 3 more years before their investigation finally went full force? Jeffrey Epstein was raping 3 minors a day. So when you think about the damage that took place before this investigation began, it is just so upsetting for the survivors.
Danielle, with all of the gaps that are here, right? There are mentions of Donald Trump. We point out that that letter today, the Epstein-Nasser letter, actually doesn't reference him by name, but he was president at the time, references the president, our president. There were mentions today of him, some, that were salacious, unverified tips, claims, whatever they may be. And then the DOJ put a statement out about that. The statement is, to be clear, the claims are unfounded and false, and if they had a shred of credibility, they certainly would have been weaponized against President Trump already. Danielle, what I find fascinating about this, among many things, but is that they didn't put a statement like this out about anybody else. You mentioned Bill Clinton, right? Nothing else, right? So in all this, where there's still a victim's name unredacted, that she wants to be redacted, co-conspirators' names are redacted, they took the time to do this. You know, what's your reaction to this? That there's still a victim's name that's unredacted when she's called and said, take my name out.
Yeah, I mean, the redactions have been intentionally careless. That's the way survivors are feeling, I think. Although we are not a monolith, I don't speak for everybody, but I think in looking at them, I saw a page today where Virginia's name is out there and Andrew's name is redacted. We are actually standing with the perpetrators.
And he's actually been punished or held to account, finally, in some ways, right, in the UK. But his name's still redacted, and hers was not.
Redacted.
It's incredible.
And so it poses the question of, like, what are we doing here? And this whole quest for transparency, like, survivors are not playing games. We are not here to play games. We are not here to be political pawns. We've been saying that from the beginning. You know, I just remember being with Jeffrey, and I remember how he would make you feel so special, like you were the only one in the room, and then he could throw you away like a piece of trash the next moment, and he could literally make you feel like a ghost. I would walk through that house and I would feel like an absolute ghost shell of myself. And it feels a little bit like, for me, the re-victimization is in the system's failures now. It is with the DOJ right now, and they are re-victimizing us in the same way. They gave us this moment of the Transparency Act where we passed a law and we were like, we're seen, we're here, we've arrived. And now to see the carelessness of the way that they're handling, you know, survivors, it's just abhorrent. It's exhausting. And we're so tired of just saying, like, please take us out of your games. Just give us the truth at this point.
Ryan, you know, not legal and morally abhorrent, the word she just used, abhorrent. I mean, what explains a situation like this, where Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, whatever his name is now, his name gets redacted, and Virginia Giuffre's name is not redacted, in the same back and forth, when everybody actually knows those two because he has finally paid a price?
So the words of Todd Blanche on Meet, this is a close paraphrase, he said, if the Attorney General released the names of victims, that would be the wrong, that would be a crime. And we are seeing that, and it's inconceivable that it's even after one of the survivors has notified the DOJ, and it's nationally known that they've notified the DOJ.
His quote, by the way, was, if they have an issue with me protecting victims, they know how to get a hold of me. That victim got a hold of the DOJ. 2 days later, her name is still in there.
We've all been
so this
trying,
rings pretty hollow. So Stacey, then, you know, at this point, you know, what do you make about the DOJ putting that statement out about Trump, saying that the things in there today that came out about him are salacious and false, but only about him and not about anybody else?
I think their priorities are pretty messed up. They had a deadline last Friday to release these files. Everyone's been waiting. The survivors have been waiting. And they dropped what they were doing. They're supposed to be, they told us, as Todd Blanche told us, they're supposed to be being very careful, going through, redacting victims' names so nobody gets hurt. Why isn't that happening? Why are they running to defend Donald Trump? Donald Trump can speak for himself and defend himself, and yet the focus here just seems to be off. And it's suspicious. And I have to say, it's shocking. The whole situation is shocking, but the Department of Justice is called, there's justice in the name for a reason. Where is the justice?
It is kind of interesting, by the way, I will just say, that they would be fine putting the Bill Clinton stuff out there, but not Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, right? And I'm not saying they shouldn't be putting Bill Clinton out there, but like, what is the rhyme or reason to the redactions? I mean, Barry, I want to ask you something else that I pointed out briefly at the beginning, and that is that Trump said, I was never on Epstein's plane. Okay, that was a quote from Trump. But then in these documents, which they have said, were full of salacious details, right, that aren't true, an assistant attorney from the Southern District of New York writes in an email on January 8th, 2020, Donald Trump traveled on Epstein's private jet many more times than previously has been reported or that we were aware, including during the period we would expect to charge in a Maxwell case. In particular, he is listed as a passenger on at least 8 flights between 1993 and 1996, including at least 4 flights on which Maxwell was also present. Barry, what does that mean?
Well, what it means is that we weren't told the truth up front by the president. And even more disturbing, in that report of the flights from 93 to 96, there's a reference that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were on a plane with 2 women who were potential Maxwell witnesses to testify at her trial. So that could place the president on a plane with Jeffrey Epstein with a possible sexual abuse victim. So again, we don't know the context. We don't know exactly what was said on the plane. We didn't know if he knew who these women were. But it is upsetting. And then you take that into account in the same time frame in 1994, you had a Jane Doe who is also in the file saying that she was 14 years old when Jeffrey Epstein took her to Mar-a-Lago and told Donald Trump, this is a good one, right? And Donald Trump apparently chuckled. That's in another report that came up in these files. So there's a lot of questions, I think, for the White House to answer. And hopefully in the coming days, we'll hear more about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, the president has not been accused of wrongdoing to this point. Neither had Bill Clinton. When Bill Clinton says, bring it on, I'm willing to fight this with what's coming out with him. We'll see what more comes out. There's a lot not there, as we know. I mean, Danielle, and I guess that's the question with where we are in this process. Not that you probably expected it to just suddenly, after decades of pain and trauma, to just suddenly rip off the Band-Aid and it's out there. I know you didn't think it would be that simple. But how are you doing right now with this just never ending?
It's so hard on survivors. I mean, just even, on Friday, I was like sitting on the floor with the computer trying to like scouring every little possible breadcrumb of information because like the website wasn't searchable in the beginning and then it was and then it crashed and then it was. So it's just been really, really impossible for survivors to find the information that we're really looking for. I do want to mention that I feel like we need a full investigation at this point from the Office of the Inspector General, because I just feel like at this point it's going to be more of the same. Like, we need somebody that can provide oversight on this whole thing, because right now it's like survivors are just, it feels like we're all the time.
Yeah. Oh, can I say something to what Danielle was saying? And I found this extremely telling today with the email that came out about the 10 co-conspirators. And again, we don't know who they are, or maybe we know some of them, or one of them was Ghislaine Maxwell. But in that same note, there was a message that the U.S. attorney should get on an airplane and go interview 25 witnesses in the case. And this was the day before, or the day that Epstein was indicted, the period where he was going to be indicted. Yeah. He'd already been arrested when this email came out the day before. And the fact that there are 25, what they're calling witnesses, to be interviewed, and then they're naming the other unindicted people co-conspirators, that's suspicious. That's what the focus should be on nowadays. Who are these unindicted co-conspirators? It is possible, though, that some of them might be the young women who were forced to work in Epstein and be in those circumstances with him while he was doing things he shouldn't have been doing.
Some of them could be, but obviously Ghislaine Maxwell was one of them, and some of them could be like her.
Right, not out of 10. And they should be letting the survivors know who those people are, because that's what the survivors are waiting to hear.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Breaking news, the top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee, Robert Garcia, demanding to know why the DOJ failed to fully investigate an Epstein allegation first made all the way back in 1996, to think about how many people's lives would be different if that had happened then. The newly released files show Epstein survivor Maria Farmer first approached the FBI with accusations against Epstein nearly 30 years ago. Farmer's lawyer saying, quote, survivors like Maria Farmer have waited nearly 3 decades for the truth to come out.
This week's release of the report is a testament to the power of persistence, the importance of survivor advocacy, and the necessity of holding our institutions accountable. And that statement coming as the redactions in the new files are raising more and more questions. MJ Lee with this exclusive reporting out front.
The Justice Department disclosing tens of thousands of additional pages of documents related to convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Among the redactions in those documents, names of Epstein's potential co-conspirators, named by federal authorities around Epstein's 2019 arrest. That omission widely criticized. Also redacted, names of some government officials, including federal prosecutors involved in some of the early criminal investigations into Epstein, leaving in the dark identities of officials who helped to negotiate the highly controversial non-prosecution deal that Epstein received in 2008. The DOJ has not explained why potential co-conspirators and prosecutors' names would require redactions. And meanwhile, one document from a lawsuit filed in the U.S. Virgin Islands against Epstein's estate in 2021 making the rounds for appearing to have botched redactions. Some text that is blacked out when copied and pasted into a document, revealing that Epstein's lawyer had signed checks for, quote, over $400,000 made payable to young female models and actresses. But CNN's review of the Virgin Islands docket indicates that the botched redaction occurred years ago. The DOJ simply republished the flawed file. Another major source of concern, information about Epstein victims and survivors whose names are unredacted and visible throughout the files. One woman who identifies as Jane Doe telling CNN she was mortified to see her real name appear throughout the Epstein files. She's contacted the DOJ multiple times to ask them to fix the error. As of Tuesday, her name still appears in the files, but CNN did find one document where her name is now redacted.
The statute also requires us to protect victims.
But many Epstein survivors and victims and lawyers representing them expressing fury over the incomplete release and slamming what they say are abnormal and extreme redactions with no explanation.
It's victim identities, national security, or ongoing investigations. Those are the categories on which they are permitted to withhold. But it sounds like they're withholding more than that.
Files released overnight Tuesday morning containing multiple new references to Donald Trump, who has not been accused by law enforcement of any wrongdoing related to Epstein. Inconsistencies related to the redaction of Trump's name further fueling questions about the extent of the president's past relationship with Epstein. In one document, the DOJ redacting Trump's name, but in another posting of that same document, Trump's name is visible.
And Aaron, we should note that when it comes to the Donald Trump references in these Epstein files, the DOJ that some documents contain untrue and sensationalist claims made against Trump that were filed to the FBI right before the 2020 election, but that the department is disclosing these documents anyway for the sake of transparency. I think transparency is certainly not a word that some people would use to describe how the rollout has gone so far.
Yeah, I think pretty fair to say that's not. Thank you very much, MJ Lee, and just all those incredible details there on the redactions, which is so crucial. I want to go to Jack O'Donnell right now because he worked closely with Donald Trump as the president and chief operating officer of Trump Plaza Hotel and Casino at the same time that Trump socialized with Epstein. Jack, who's familiar face to viewers of this program, is also the author of Trumped, the inside story of the real Donald Trump. And Jack, you know, look, you've said loud and clear in conversations you and I have had on this show that Epstein was Trump's best friend and that you had seen them so many times together, right? I mean, that there was a reason that you had that view. How much do you think that the Epstein files that have been released so far backs that up?
Well, I think today's announcement that they've at least 8 flights that Donald Trump took on Epstein's plane, is a clear sign that they're at the very least very, very good friends. So I think anybody like myself that claimed they were best friends, I think that's validation at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you certainly weren't alone in that. I mean, there have been others, that I've spoken to who knew both individuals or interacted with them during those years who had the same exact description. But, when I said in the file so far, Jack, I said that on purpose because the reality of it is it's been dribs and drabs and putting aside the, at best, sloppy nature of the redactions thus far. There's a whole lot that still hasn't been put out there, and there's no rhyme or reason. It's perhaps purposely deeply confusing as to what is coming out when. Do you think, from what is not out there so far, that there's anything that will be a surprise to Trump?
Well, I don't think there's going to be anything that's a surprise to him because I'm convinced that he knows absolutely what's in those files. And I think that's what is taking so long. This strategy, by the way, of drip, drip, drip is just ridiculous on his part. I mean, first off, it's an egregious way to treat these victims, to do this to them. And now it almost seems purposeful. But he knows what's in these files. And I think that's very simply what's going on. And, obviously I don't know for fact, but, this is turned into a cover up. And it is not just a small one. I look at it and I say, it kind of reminds me of what the Catholic Church went through. Had they been a little bit more honest right up front, they wouldn't have had years of this misery for these, little boys. And that's something that's important here, Aaron, to me. They're looking at these victims as women, the women that they are today. These were children, okay, that this happened to. I mean, and that's the part that I think sometimes is lost on everybody. These were children.
Yeah, I mean, Barry Levine has reported and spoken about people as young as 11 and 12 years old, girls as young as 11 and 12 years old, and Barry's reporting over the years. I know, Jack, that you think that there's concern that Trump could worry about in terms of what's redacted and held back from the files, that he should worry about what's redacted. How come?
Well, because I think it might prove that a crime was committed on his behalf. But again, at the very least, it's going to probably lead to the conclusion that at least he knew what Epstein was up to, okay? And then that begs the question, what kind of character is a man that's in the presidency of the United States that knew about this behavior and continued to have him as a friend and only defriended him when the law was breathing down Epstein's neck?
All right, Jack O'Donnell, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. And of course, as always, I'll just remind everyone that Trump has not been accused by law enforcement of wrongdoing related to Epstein's crimes and, of course, has denied any wrongdoing or knowledge of his crimes. Thanks so much, Jack. I appreciate your time. Breaking news at this hour, newly released Epstein files reveal that President Trump's Mar-a-Lago club was subpoenaed in 2021 as part of the government investigation into Epstein accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell. That subpoena demands, quote, any and all employment records relating to, and then the person's name is redacted. Maxwell is the only Epstein accomplice to be convicted. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison for her crimes, but just days ago asked a court to have her conviction thrown out. One of Epstein's victims, Virginia Giuffre, accused Maxwell of recruiting her from Mar-a-Lago when she worked there as a teenager. Trump, of course, has never been accused of any criminal wrongdoing. Sam Mangle is out front now. He's a federal prison consultant who has clients in the same minimum security prison that Maxwell was transferred to over the summer, pretty much immediately following her multiple interviews with the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, suddenly and without notice transferred to this minimum security facility. So, Sam, what are your sources telling you? And I know, you're well aware of what many other women in the prison are hearing and specifically seeing. What are you hearing about what fellow prisoners are dealing with inside the prison right now as these Epstein files come out and Ghislaine Maxwell is there?
Sure. So since the last time we spoke, things really had quieted down quite a bit. I think that the staff and the inmates were really resigned to the fact that she was there, and they had to do whatever was necessary, because all of them eventually were getting out. And in a camp, you're only there for typically a short period of time. So rocking the boat, whether staff or inmate, didn't prove fruitful. When all this started coming out, and I've spoken with two family members, a mother and a sister of two clients that are currently there, the analogy was it's like they ripped the Band-Aid off and put fresh salt into this wound. And if you can imagine 50 women sitting in a TV room, 75% of which are either victims of sexual violence themselves or have daughters the same age as Maxwell's victims. And they're watching TV and seeing all these documents and pictures coming out, and the person they're talking about is in the room behind them and getting some sort of special treatment, and is bragging, I'm told, that she might not be there that long. Now, whether the insinuation is I'm going to be transferred or receive some sort of clemency, I don't know, but it's not only infuriating to the women, it's depressing, it's hurtful. You know, in prison, you know, it's a very lonely place. And when you're sitting there and something like this happens to you, it just deflates you more than you can imagine. And when things calm down, and now to have it open up to the degree that it has, and certainly for the foreseeable future, much more, it's a terrible situation.
Sam, so on that prison transfer, incredibly controversial because unprecedented in terms of her going from the level of prison she was to this one, given the nature of her conviction and her crimes. Days after she met with Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche just spoke about this and the whole transfer itself. Here's what he said. I wanted to play it for you.
At the time that I met Ms. Maxwell, there was a tremendous amount of scrutiny and publicity towards her, and the institution she was in, she was suffering numerous threats against her life. So the BOP is not only responsible for putting people in jail and making sure they stay in jail, but also for their safety. And so she was moved. She is in federal prison. She was in federal prison before. She's in federal prison now.
But of course, now she's in a minimum security prison where inmates can work in the community, all sorts of things, which someone convicted of trafficking underage girls would not be. What do you say to that entire explanation?
So I absolutely agree with Mr. Blanche that it is the obligation and responsibility of the prison to keep their inmates safe and secure. Transferring prisoners happens all the time. I have clients that cooperate, and one thing or another happens to them, they're transferred, but they're transferred laterally. They're transferred from one camp to another camp. They're transferred from one low security facility to another low security facility. There are probably at least a half a dozen other low security women's prisons in the country that she could have gone to. It is unheard of, from my experience, to have someone with two safety factors, one of which was the sex charge, to be transferred from a low security to a minimum security facility. So, yes, he's right. Right.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time, and thank you so much, Sam. It's good to talk to you again.
Breaking news tonight on how the Justice Department is trying to speed up the release of the Epstein files days after the deadline passed for them all to be made public. More on that in just a moment. Today, more than 30,000 files released from the investigation of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. One of the things we learned is that prosecutors in 2019 sought to investigate and potentially charge upwards of 10 possible co-conspirators. Another document purportedly showed a letter handwritten by Epstein while he was in jail in 2019, the same month he committed suicide. It is signed by J. Epstein and addressed to convicted sex offender Larry Nassar. Now, it does not explicitly name President Trump, but includes a reference to our president, and Trump was president at the time. But late this afternoon, the Justice Department released this post. The FBI has confirmed this alleged letter from Jeffrey Epstein to Larry Nassar is fake. The FBI made this conclusion based on the following facts. The writing does not appear to match Epstein's handwriting. The letter was postmarked 3 days after Epstein's death, postmarked out of Northern Virginia when he was jailed in New York. The return address did not list the jail where Epstein was held and did not include his inmate number, which is required for outgoing mail. The Post also says that just because a document is released by the Department of Justice, it does not mean the allegations are true. Some of the files released today do contain the president's name. For example, one email dated from 2020 from an assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York noted that Trump flew on Epstein's private jet many more times than previously reported, many more times than they knew, at least 8 times between 1993 and 1996. President Trump has not been accused of any criminal wrongdoing related to Epstein. Still, the department put out a statement today that reads as if it was a letter from his personal lawyer, calling some claims about the president in the documents released today untrue and sensationalist, and went on to say if they had a shred of credibility, they certainly would have been weaponized against President Trump already. Now, they did not say anything like this when they released photos and references to Bill Clinton on Friday, which of course was when the Epstein Files Transparency Act mandated that all the Epstein files be released, but only a portion were made public then. The Justice Department has come under criticism for the delay and the extensive redactions of the material. Some Democrats accuse the department of attempting to cover up information unfavorable to the president, and survivors, some, are outraged by the whole process.
I am so disgusted with this administration. I think that Pam Bondi and Kash Patel both need to resign. And I would love to see number 47 get impeached over this. I don't trust my government. I don't trust the redactions. I don't trust the DOJ.
CNN senior crime and justice reporter Caitlin Polantz joins us now. And Caitlin, it's literally been from dawn until dusk for you on this story today. You've got some new reporting on the lengths that the Justice Department is going to in order to go through more of these files.
Yeah, an email I just reviewed from a source showing what is going on inside the Justice Department right now to try and get these hundreds of thousands, if not more, documents redacted in the Epstein files and getting them out to the public. The Justice Department, they need volunteers, more attorneys to work on this. They're saying it's an emergency, even after that transparency deadline already passed on Friday, and they knew that that deadline was coming for a full 30 days when Congress passed the law right around Thanksgiving. And this also raises the possibility that more documents from the Epstein files will become public over the next several days, including over the Christmas holidays, the New Year's holiday. I want to read for you a little bit of what is in this email. So this is an email from a top prosecutor in the Southern District of Florida's U.S. Attorney's Office, writing to everybody in that office. And the email says it's an emergency request from the Deputy Attorney General's office that the SDFL, that U.S. Attorney's Office in Florida, must assist with. We need AUSAs, so career prosecutors, line attorneys, to do remote document review and redactions related to the Epstein files. I am aware that the timing could not be worse. For some, the holidays are about to begin, but I know that for others, the holidays are coming to an end. That's the end of the quote from this email. But this really highlights, John, the situation the Justice Department is in, blowing past that deadline, still having documents to redact, and needing more people to get it done. Remember, there's another deadline coming up for the Justice Department to tell Congress what all they have redacted, explaining it. And just now, several days heading after the deadline that Congress set for transparency, heading into the Christmas holiday, they are trying to get more people to volunteer their time to go through these files, redact them, and get them online for the public to look at.
This is not what the law said. I mean, the law said they were supposed to all be out last Friday. The fact that they're acting for people now doesn't seem to comport with that at all. As I mentioned, Caitlin, there was an email exchange about 10 potential Epstein co-conspirators. What's going on there?
Yeah, this is an internal FBI email. It's detectives essentially talking the day after Epstein was arrested in 2019. In that email, they're talking about what they call co-conspirators, 10 co-conspirators, and they're talking about the status of them. Are they going to maybe cut grand jury subpoenas to those people? Those people aren't named, nor are the detectives on these emails. You can see those blackout to and from lines. But this does raise some questions about what the FBI was thinking at this time as they were investigating and charging Epstein before they had charged his co-conspirator, now convicted, Ghislaine Maxwell. But this is also not prosecutors talking, and the word co-conspirators could be used very loosely here. It doesn't necessarily mean people who may have potentially taken steps that would have resulted in federal crimes, but it is a notable document among this release, again, without context.
We don't know if it's the legal definition of co-conspirator or not. Still significant. Caitlin Polis, thank you for your reporting all day on this. I want to bring in Julie K. Brown, award-winning investigative reporter for the Miami Herald, whose work was instrumental in exposing the extent of Jeffrey Epstein's crime. She's also the author of Perversion of Justice, the Jeffrey Epstein Story. And Sarah Fitzpatrick, staff writer for The Atlantic, who covers national security and the Department of Justice. And Julie, I just want to start with you and the fact that these files today made this reference to 10 co-conspirators, a file from 2019, but the names are all redacted, as are the names of the various attorneys involved. So, Julie, what do you think of that?
Well, some of the names are in there. Maxwell, we know, was one co-conspirator. They mentioned Jean-Luc Brunel, who was one of the modeling scouts that they used, who was also accused of raping some of these women and young girls. And he died, of course, in prison of suicide in 2022. And then there's another name of interest, which is Les Wexner, who's listed as a co-conspirator. He was the billionaire former owner of Victoria's Secret. And Epstein sort of used his affiliation with Victoria's Secret to recruit girls and to lure them by asking them to provide him with auditions, so to speak. And essentially that was a ruse to abuse them. So there are 3 people. Then the other people we believe that are redacted from there could be a couple of his assistants who helped recruit and also schedule his calendars, and possibly a pilot who transported some of these girls and young women. So we suspect who they are, but nevertheless, there are an awful lot of redactions still in here, and it makes the victims very, suspect that this is really still being covered up, and the powerful men that they know are involved are still somehow being protected.
We should note that Les Wexner himself has never been accused of any wrongdoing or charged with any wrongdoing, and is said to have cooperated with the investigation all along. It is worth noting the Epstein Transparency Act, the law, says that no one's name is supposed to be redacted on the basis of embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity, including to any government official, public figure, or foreign dignitary. I mean, every time you see those black marks over those names, it doesn't appear to comport with the law, Julie, does it?
Oh, and certainly there's an awful lot of them. As was mentioned earlier, the DOJ is rushing now to get volunteers to become this redaction police with these documents. And so far what we've seen is that they're redacting the wrong things, that the victims' names, I had one victim call me yesterday in tears that her name is in there something like, dozens and dozens of times. What they worry about isn't necessarily even themselves, it's their families. She has elderly parents, and so it affects them, and they have children. So they're redacting the names of all the prosecutors, for example, who dealt with this case back in 2006, but yet they're not careful enough to redact some of the names of these victims.
Sarah, what stood out to you today in all of these documents that have been released and you've had a chance to look at?
Look, I think today, I've covered the story for a very long time, as has Julie. Today was explosive. And the thing that caught my attention, I think most importantly, were those discussions from SDNY prosecutors discussing the fact that Donald Trump had been on Epstein's plane many more times than they had ever realized. And in fact, that Donald Trump had been on the plane with witnesses that were could be witnesses in Maxwell's trial, as well as a one flight in which Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein, and a 20-year-old are described as being on the plane. This is critical because we know that this investigation was supposedly Bondi came in, all sorts of multiple administrations have said that they have tried to fully report this out. And yet here we are seeing the sitting president who is in proximity to a possible crime, or at least could have information about Epstein's patterns, behavior, etc. He was on the plane with critical people that were witnesses to a crime. And I think this draws the question, what exactly, we've had so many years under both a Trump Justice Department and then a Biden Justice Department and now a Trump Justice Department, and yet we still don't have the person at the top of our government is a person who may have information that would be valuable to investigators. That, I think, just is so crucial and cannot be overstated.
In the last line of that document, which was a note from a career prosecutor, said, "We've just finished reviewing these full records and didn't want any of this to be a surprise down the road." So they were revealing this information about the plane trips from President Trump, but the reason they were revealing it was because they didn't want the fact that then President Trump's name was in it to be a surprise. So what does that tell you about who they were thinking of? Was it the victims? Was it the survivors?
Look, I think it has been crystal clear among all of the information that I've ever reviewed, both in public and that still is to be released, that the victims were never or very rarely at the center of decisions here, and that they were often an afterthought, in part because the people that, whose names have been mentioned, who may appear in these documents, they were people with extremely highly paid, aggressive lawyers. And the Justice Department, under Donald Trump, under Joe Biden, now again, they are fearful of that kind of litigation, of those kind of pressure. The victims, many of these women, today I was speaking to some of them, they work, they work retail jobs, for hourly wages. They are not able to have that kind of pressure on a Justice Department. But many of these powerful individuals absolutely have and continue to assert that pressure.
Jeffrey Epstein, and they show powerful figures like President Trump, Trump advisor Steve Bannon, and former President Bill Clinton. None of those released images depict any sexual misconduct, nor are believed to depict underage girls. It was not immediately clear when or where they were taken, or by whom, for that matter. I want to go live right now to CNN anchor and chief White House correspondent Caitlin Collins, who's been working the story for us. Caitlin, what are we learning from these new images?
Well, this is some reporting I've done with my colleague, Annie Grayer. And basically what we're getting and what we're seeing being released today are photos from the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee. It's from Jeffrey Epstein's estate, which has been turning over emails and other records of his from his life. This latest production is over 95,000 photos that he had on his computer, on his email server. And basically what they do, Wolf, is just reinforce and shed new light on the extent of the many powerful people that were in Jeffrey Epstein's orbit. I mean, you can see this when you look through these pictures, and they're available to scroll through in our story on CNN.com right now. And there are people including the current president, President Trump, former President Bill Clinton, Steve Bannon, Bill Gates, Richard Branson. A lot of these people that we knew had been linked to Jeffrey Epstein in the past, Wolf. But basically, this is just showing new angles of those relationships. And they're incredibly personal photos, and some of them and others, they're a bit, it's kind of hard to even explain what you're looking at. We've published the ones that we've been able to online, though, and basically they just show all the high and powerful people in his orbit. Well, there's one where it's got Bill Clinton with Epstein. There's one that includes Steve Bannon, who, as you remember, was a huge advisor to President Trump in his 2016 campaign and also worked for him in the White House. And they're just really remarkable images showing what Jeffrey Epstein's life was like before he became ensnared in all of this trouble, and when he was eventually, of course, charged and indicted for sex trafficking young underage women. And I should note, Wolf, as you noted, none of the pictures that we're releasing today that we've gotten our hands on show any sexual misconduct. We don't believe any show any underage girls. It's really just speaking more to Jeffrey Epstein's life and what that looked like. And lawyers for his estate basically told the committee that they had photos, they have videos that were taken at any property that was owned, rented, operated, or used by Jeffrey Epstein for about 30 years. So that just kind of tells you the span of what you're looking at here is Jeffrey Epstein was surrounding himself with a lot of powerful people, which of course we now know also helped insulate him at times from the crimes he was committing.
Tonight, CNN is continuing to pour through the hundreds of thousands of Epstein documents that were released by the Justice Department today. There's one FBI document that is offering two of Epstein's survivors, Annie and Maria Farmer, vindication. Now, this FBI document from 1996 includes a description of a criminal complaint against Jeffrey Epstein related to child pornography, underscoring the fact that Epstein would have been on the radar of law enforcement years before the federal and state charges were brought against him. Now, back in August, you might be familiar with this story because I talked to Annie Farmer about her sister's complaint to the FBI in 1996, which she said went ignored. Annie, where do you personally come down on the calls to release everything? Do you agree with that?
Yes, I'm definitely supportive of more transparency in this case. You know, my sister has filed this lawsuit in order to have more information released as to why her 1996 FBI report, why nothing was done, right? That's something that has been so upsetting for us to know how many people were harmed that didn't need to be if there had been more follow-up at that time. And a piece of this case that hasn't gotten a lot of attention is the fact that, you know, when she was assaulted, there were also photos that were stolen from her. She was an artist, she was a figurative artist, and she took photos of myself and my sister, partially nude photos, to work from, as a lot of artists do. But those photos were stolen by Maxwell and Epstein, and we've never been told, even though we know that, you know, photos have been found, we've never been told, were our photos a part of that? We would like to know, of course, if that is the case. And I think that's the kind of thing, you know, transparency might bring. It's more information for people involved.
So that's what she told us in August. And today, as you're going through the release of these documents, there's a document that stands out. The name of the complainant is redacted, but Maria Farmer's attorney confirmed to CNN tonight that this is from her. And the document corroborates their story because it reads in part that Epstein stole the photos and negatives and is believed to have sold the pictures to potential buyers. Epstein at one time requested that redacted to take pictures of young girls at swimming pools. Epstein is now threatening redacted that if she tells anyone about the photos, he will burn her house down. Maria Farmer provided this statement to CNN following the documents released tonight. And here's why this matters, because they said the FBI ignored it at the time, that it basically just went unanswered. And their quote and their argument was that it would have actually helped prevent the abuse of future young women. So Maria responded tonight to this vindication and said, "This is amazing. I feel redeemed. Of course, it's mixed with the fact that I'm devastated about all the other little girls like Virginia who were harmed because the FBI didn't do their job." Tonight, we heard from Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Remember, she broke with her party to push and is part of the reason why the president had to sign that law that compelled this release tonight. She responded to this disclosure about the farmers and said, "Trump called me a traitor for refusing to take my name off the discharge petition. I couldn't be more proud that I stayed on." The former FBI Deputy Director, Andrew McCabe, is here with me now. And it's pretty hard to hear this, I think, and to think about the perspective of Maria and Annie Farmer, who had the guts to go to the FBI, file this document against someone who was incredibly rich and powerful, and then they say, never heard from the FBI, that they just never even acknowledged it. And now we know it's real, it was filed, and nothing happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely heartbreaking on so many levels. Not the least of which is the fact that they never got any follow-up as to what the FBI thought of their complaint, what decisions they made as a result of it. But then you extrapolate that out into the future, that if they had taken some action, what would have been the result? What sort of harm could have been prevented over time? It's just, it's really hard to get your mind around it. And I'm sure it's an unbelievably emotional day for those women.
Yeah. I mean, I think the question a lot of people have is how and why the FBI wouldn't have followed up on this. And I mean, I understand you have to make decisions based on tips and complaints and whatnot, but I mean, they got a complaint about this guy in 1996, and you just have to think about what happened in the 2 decades that followed after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me walk you through a little bit of the mechanics. the document that you're seeing, if you look up in the top left-hand corner of the document, you see the letters FD 71. That stands for Federal Document 71. In those days, that was the FBI complaint form. So if you called into the FBI and made a complaint about what you thought was a violation of the law, somebody who answered the phone would take information from you in that conversation. They would memorialize it on this document. And then they would decide, based on what you told them, which squad to send it to. This was, I understand, was called into the New York City field office. So that person would route this document, this is the old days, physical documents, to the squad supervisor who was responsible for the violations that might be referenced in the complaint. That supervisor would have the authority to decide whether or not to assign that complaint to an agent on their squad for follow-up investigation. So it's possible that it never went beyond that supervisor's desk. It's possible it was assigned to someone who looked into it and maybe couldn't confirm the details. It's possible that it slipped through the cracks entirely, which is unforgivable, but within the realm of the possible here. Yeah. What they would look, as I read this complaint today, it references, in the least case, a theft and a possible extortion, where he's threatening to burn down her house if she tells anybody about these photographs. But in the worst case, it talks about a person who might be engaged in trafficking in child pornography or information that could qualify as images that could qualify as child pornography. So it's incredibly serious. It's hard for me to understand how action was not taken. But again, it's 1996. The FBI would have to go back now and look at the documentation around this complaint to figure out what happened or why it didn't.
Yeah. And her sisters were 12 and 16 at the time of those photographs. Andy McCabe, thank you for joining us tonight. I'm also joined tonight by a survivor of Jeffrey Epstein's. Lisa Phillips was in her early 20s when she first met him and says she endured years of abuse from him and from other people in his network. And thank you for being here. We've heard a lot from lawyers. We've heard a lot from lawmakers. How are you feeling tonight?
Well, I'm feeling very upset. I've always stood up and I stand for so many survivors out there. I was in my early 20s. There was hundreds of girls in their early 20s, but we're always thinking about, the children, the teenagers that were harmed in this way. And as you guys are reporting on, Maria Farmer coming forward in the late 90s, 1996, almost 30 years ago, and saying that, these people were taking, pictures of us and selling them to others. And then they were threatened not to say anything. That's a pretty big statement to say. That's pretty much the same thing that most of the survivors coming forward today are saying. The same type of fear that they had and the same type of silencing and threatening. And I don't believe, I know the former person you just had on said that, maybe it slipped through the cracks or they didn't follow up on it. There's no way that it was slipping through the cracks or they weren't following up on it. What happened is they realized they were probably up against very powerful people. And I believe that's what's mirroring what's happening today. 30 years later, they're still seeing, oh my goodness, we're up against these very powerful people. What do we do? And that's why we're seeing with these files, just little things here and there and so much being redacted and not getting the full picture and the full answers.
Yeah, the Justice Department says they're protecting victims by not releasing everything and by redacting things. That's not how you see it, though, tonight.
No, because the victims want answers. We want to know, we want to connect the dots. We want our stories to make sense. We want to know a lot of different things. So, of course, they're just going to say that just buys time, but they're protecting themselves, not the victims.
You had said before that you had talked to some other survivors as well and talked about creating your own list of the people who are around Epstein that, in addition to him, abused women. Do you think that is still something that is a step y'all might have to take?
Well, we've been taking that step. We've been talking to survivors. And when I spoke to survivors, many more have come forward. And by speaking to others, remember, there's hundreds of us. So not myself in particular, but many others who were younger, underage, or were forced to sleep with certain people. They know those names, and we have put those lists together and given them to the proper authorities. And so I do feel like the DOJ and everybody has everything they need. And with going through the files, you can also pick them out and say, okay, this person was here, and do a little bit more research and a little more digging on those particular people that we've given them those names. I don't understand why it's not happening. I feel like they have so much information to start connecting the dots and for survivors to get justice. But as you're seeing, we just keep stalling.
Lisa, what would you say to the Attorney General or the Deputy Attorney General? If you could talk to them tonight about this, what would you say?
Start caring, really start caring. I have a 14-year-old child. It's a child. There's no reason why Epstein and the people who were involved were even surrounded by children. Even girls like myself that were in our early 20s, why were we brought to these parties or to the island with these much older men? There's a power dynamic here. Anybody can see that something is off and something is wrong. And there's plenty of evidence that there's a human trafficking ring going on. So I don't even know why we're still debating that. So please have a heart and understand that I represent hundreds of survivors, if not thousands. I believe the DOJ said there was 1,200. Like, think about that. 1,200 people, 1,200 young people that were harmed by this man, and he wasn't doing it all by himself. So that's what I would say. Start caring. We need answers.
1,200 victims and their relatives. Lisa Phillips, thank you for joining me tonight. I really do appreciate hearing from you. I think it's good for everyone to be able to hear your perspective on this.
In our Law and Justice lead, the White House is touting its transparency after a massive Epstein document dump as required by law. With a noticeable trove of images of former Democratic President Bill Clinton accompanying convicted sex offenders Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell shirtless in a hot tub next to a person whose face is redacted, swimming next to Maxwell, standing by Epstein holding a drink. We should note, we don't know when these pictures were taken. It is possible they were taken before Maxwell or Epstein were ever charged with anything. We should note also that Clinton has never been accused by law enforcement of any wrongdoing related to Epstein. Let's bring in CNN senior legal analyst Ellie Honig. Ellie, as a former federal prosecutor, I have to ask, the Justice Department is not today abiding by the law that passed 30 days. They haven't produced everything, and this database is not searchable. Are there any repercussions if the Justice Department violates the law?
Well, Jake, ordinarily, it would be unthinkable for the Justice Department to be presented with a law duly passed by the House, passed by the Senate, signed by the president, and then to come back with a response of, well, we tried, here's some of it, we'll get to it when we get to it. Is there any repercussions? It's really hard to say. I mean, you could see a lawsuit. We've heard some Democratic members of Congress in the last couple hours say they're considering that. That'll take time. DOJ has also said they'll complete this disclosure by the new year. So within the next couple weeks, we'll see if they make good on that. But really, ultimately, it has to come from Congress. This is the kind of thing that needs to be resolved with political pressure, political consequence. But really, it is just unthinkable and disturbing that DOJ would just sort of casually brush off a law.
And we should note, the law also requires the names of the victims or survivors to be redacted, and nobody is suggesting anything other than that should be adhered to. The names of the victims and the survivors should be redacted. But that said, they're not following the law that the president signed. As a prosecutor, I don't know what you're seeing in these documents that are being released, the ones that haven't been just completely blacked out. So you can't even tell what kind of document it is. What are you seeing in here? Is it documents that you thought you'd see, what you expected to see?
So really important point here, Jake. Some of what I'm seeing is what you would expect to see in a prosecutor's file. I've seen financial records, I've seen flight records, I've seen a bunch of photographs, I've seen some witness summaries. However, this is a really important point. Evan Perez just said that DOJ is taking the position that they do not have to disclose documents that are protected by something called the deliberative process privilege. Now, what that means is ordinarily prosecutors, DOJ would never turn over our internal memos. So, for example, a memo I might have written saying, I think we should charge this case. I do not think we should charge this case. I think we should do this plea deal or not do this plea deal. And so Evan's saying DOJ's position is we don't have to turn those over. That is contrary to this Epstein files law. Let me read you something that's in the law. Section 7 says that DOJ must produce, I'm going to read directly, internal DOJ communications, including emails, memos, meeting notes, concerning decisions to charge, not charge, investigate, or decline to investigate Epstein or his associates. That's the exact language of this law that is required to be turned over. And really, Jake, as you know, and Julie Brown, who you just had on, knows, that's really one of the biggest questions here. Why on earth did prosecutors make that decision back in 2007 to give Epstein such a softball deal? And so if DOJ's position is we don't have to turn that stuff over, those internal deliberative documents, they're wrong and they're going against what this law calls for.
Ellie Honig, stay with me. Joining us now, New York Republican Congressman Mike Lawler. Congressman Lawler, your initial thoughts on the trove of documents and photos that have been released?
I'm sorry, say that again, Jake?
What's your initial response to what's been released so far in these Epstein files?
Well, I haven't had a chance to review it other than the report I saw just a little bit before coming on that you covered. But I'm not surprised. There's going to be obviously photos released. There's going to be financial records, flights, manifest release. So we're going to obviously dig into the details here. As I've said from the very beginning, anyone who was involved in the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein, in furtherance of the sexual exploitation or abuse of minors and women, should be prosecuted. Mm-hmm. And if there is evidence that comes out through this release of anyone, whether they be in government or entertainment or the financial world, they should be prosecuted.
So,
and we will see what obviously this searchable database with hundreds of thousands of documents and and obviously more to come.
So the House 30 days ago, or more than 30 days ago, passed this bill requiring all of these files to be released with the survivors and victims' names redacted, but the impetus was on the Justice Department to explain why they redacted anything other than that. And yet, the Deputy Attorney General today said they're not going to release all the documents today. It appears it's just going to be a fraction. The law also said that the database had to be searchable, and the database, at least last time I checked, it was not searchable. Does it bother you that the Justice Department is not abiding by the law that President Trump signed 30 days ago?
Look, I think they obviously should comply fully with the law. I think given the volume of documents, I assume they have a lot of people working on redacting where appropriate within the law and going through each of these documents to make sure that they are released appropriately. I would venture once the grand jury transcripts were court-ordered released and they have to go through that added significant volume here in terms of having to go through the documents. So, look, I think they need to obviously comply expeditiously, and I do believe that's their intent. And, obviously, ideally it would have been done in full today, but given the volume, I'm not sure how realistic that really was within 30 days of the law being signed.
Your fellow New York Republican, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, just announced that not only is she bowing out of the race for governor of New York, which you were going to do as well at one point, she's not even going to run for re-election in the House. Now that there is an opening, are you going to throw your hat back into the ring and run for governor?
Well, first, let me say Elise Stefanik has been a tremendous congresswoman. She certainly would have made a great governor. And, as a colleague, as a friend, I understand her decision. These are not easy decisions to make, especially with a young family. I have two young daughters. And that factored into, my considerations earlier this year. Obviously, I'm just seeing the news like everybody else within the last hour. So I'm going to take a little bit of time before I comment further as to what I may or may not do. But look, I think the focus, of course, for us in New York has to be on defeating Kathy Hochul. She's the single worst governor in the country and has been an abject disaster on the issues that matter to New Yorkers, from affordability to public safety, housing, energy, healthcare, et cetera. So we'll see what comes of this. But before I kind of wrap my head around it, I'm going to take a little bit of time.
Republican Congressman Mike Lawler, thank you. Merry Christmas to you. We've had you on the show a lot this year. We really appreciate your taking our questions. Thank you so much. We hope you have a great holiday with your family, and best wishes for 2026.
Thank you, Jake. Happy Hanukkah and Merry Christmas to everyone.
We'll stay with the breaking news. The Justice Department released at least some of its files on dead pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. An attorney for some of Epstein's survivors is going to join me next.
The department releases thousands of files related to Jeffrey Epstein after months of political pressure. The EU decides to lend its own money to Ukraine rather than use those frozen Russian assets. I'll speak to the EU's ambassador to the U.S. And YouTuber Jake Paul is set to box former heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua in just a few hours' time. We do begin, though, with the breaking news. The U.S. Justice Department released some of the many files it has on the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. CNN teams are now going through those documents. There are a lot of them. It will take time to sift through them. One image just released shows former President Bill Clinton in a jacuzzi next to another person whose face is redacted. Another shows him holding a drink next to Epstein. Unclear where or when those particular photographs were taken. CNN has reached out to a spokesperson for Bill Clinton regarding those images. It is important to note he has never been accused by law enforcement of any criminal wrongdoing related to Epstein. A spokesperson has repeatedly said he cut ties with him before his arrest on federal charges in 2019, years before, and did not know about those crimes. Today is the deadline for the DOJ to release all of the files it has remaining on Epstein. That was passed by a large bipartisan majority in Congress, signed into law by President Trump. The Epstein Files Transparency Act was passed 30 days ago. Only one House member voted against it, Republican Clay Higgins. However, this morning it became clear there might be a problem with following the letter of that law. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche said he was not going to release all the files today.
I expect that we're going to release several 100,000 documents today, and those documents will come in all different forms, photographs and other materials associated with all of the investigations into Mr. Epstein. And so I expect that we're going to release more documents over the next couple of weeks. So today, several 100,000, and then over the next couple of weeks, I expect several 100,000 more.
Last month, the House Oversight Committee released 20,000 pages of records it received from the Epstein estate through a congressional subpoena. Those files included multiple emails which mentioned President Donald Trump. We should note, however, Trump has not been accused of criminal wrongdoing in the Epstein case. He has also denied any involvement. Joining us now from Capitol Hill, Annie Greer. I wonder what the reaction is there, because, of course, as you know, there was enormous bipartisan support to release all the documents. Are lawmakers satisfied with what the administration did today?
Well, we're not hearing a lot from Republicans so far, Jim, but Democrats are pretty upset by what is happening. They do not see what the Department of Justice has done today as complying with the law. They wanted all documents to be released today, and they have major concerns. The top Democrat on both the House Judiciary and top Democrat on House Oversight put out a joint statement and they said that they were looking at all options on the table, including legal actions. I recently spoke with Congressman Ro Khanna, who co-authored co-authored the legislation that led to the mandated release of these files. And he said he's thinking about inherent contempt, criminal cases, civil cases, even impeachment if it led to it and the Department of Justice does not ultimately comply with releasing everything. Now, I've also obtained a letter that Todd Blanche sent to Congress today explaining the redactions that went into the release today and the process for how the over 200 Department of Justice attorneys who worked on this matter, what the process that they went through. And Blanche said that over 1,200 names of victims and their families